Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Not bad. So, we've got WWDC 2020 to talk about this week on Happy Hour. Let's kick it off with just sort of what we thought about the keynote format and how there was no in-person event for this special Apple event and kind of how they handled that because it was very, very different from what, previous events have had to be like, right?
So yeah, obviously normally for a WWDC event, they'd invite the whole developer crowd. So that's about 5,000 invited developers. Then you have the press as well. And that would normally be done in like a big convention center. Like in recent years, they've done it in the McHenry Convention Center. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen this time around because it was all virtual anyway. And so there were lots of questions about how they were going to do it. Was it going to be, just done in people's offices? Was it going to be done in the theater? Was it going to be live streamed? And it was kind of interesting. I don't think anyone was quite expecting how they did it. So obviously, Tim Cook came out at the start and he was in the Steve Jobs Theater, but obviously the theater was empty, right? And so he was talking to the camera and they had multiple cameras set up. And so it became very apparent very quickly that it wasn't going to be live streamed at all. This whole video was pre-recorded, right? But it came with production values to match. So like it was very well produced video where you'd have like Cook come out, he'd do his little intro speech. He addressed obviously the coronavirus situation. He addressed the racism tragedies and equality issues. And then when they got into the operating systems, they would cut back and forth with different people. So you had like Craig and Kevin Lynch, and you had some other faces, many of which we haven't seen for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the transition's really interesting. So at the very start, they were kind of showing this like globe look down, and it was like little emojis lighting up the earth, and they would like zoom all the way into the Apple Park Theater, and it would be like, wow, that was cool. And then, but they also kept doing that when they would switch from place to place. So Craig was like in the atrium bit of the Steve Jobs Theater, so they would have some sort of drone shot, or maybe it was CGI, it was some combination, fly around the place, and then when they go to the labs, they would fly again. It was really clever, I thought. Like for given the constraints that they obviously had in the world, they pulled off like quite an impressive package, and it was what, 1 hour 50 about that.
Yeah, it was like 149. I thought that the keynote itself was like probably the most rewatchable keynote in recent years since like Steve Jobs keynotes that you can just go back and rewatch and just learn things from about presentation and information. But just in the fact that like the keynote as a 2 hour video to rewatch for disseminating information, it was fast paced. It was dense. There was none of the like crowd shots and handoff time and like impromptu jokes being made. It was it would be so neat to see kind of the behind the scenes of how the production went. And they even had a thing at the very end of the presentation that was like it reminded me of like when you see in movie credits, no animals were harmed in the production of this movie. It was like that, but for people because of COVID-19, and it was like this is how we filmed. Everyone but the presenter wore mask, and
we washed everything down, we
right.
sanitized everything. Yeah, people were separated around. Like
exactly.
They laid it all out.
Yeah. But like this presentation wise, like, I don't know if Apple a decade ago could have pulled it off in quite that way, but they've got so much experience in video production, whether it's from, Apple TV Plus stuff, where they did that keynote, a year and a half ago where it's about services. Like that wasn't bot content. It was like, where they're like demoing, they're kind of like do like the master reel of everything. And they've also got all the experience of putting together like the intro videos every year.
And they have a massive like internal marketing department now that they never used to have, right? Like they've massive video teams and stuff. Because in the old days, and when we say old days, you need to go back like 10 years maybe. It was all done with external agencies. You didn't really get the same cleverness of like the videos at the front with the CGI animations, or the smarts. Like you'd occasionally get like the Mac versus PC video introduced at WWDC once, or you had like a little Siri skit, but way smaller scale than what they do in recent years, just because the company's so big and they also have so many more resources than they ever did before. And I think it really shows at a time like this, right? Like if you were like an alien from outer space who wasn't aware of the pandemic situation and you just watched that video, you probably wouldn't even realize anything was wrong, right?
Sure,
it was just so well done and produced that if you didn't know that in a normal year this would have been done in front of a live audience, you'd think this is like how it was done all the time.
Yeah, and I noticed just from our perspective of covering the keynote by watching the live stream, so covering it for 9to5mac.com, was that wow, this feels very dense and fast paced. And that's because you didn't have so much the downtime of like, here's a game demo, here's a transition.
Or even like pauses for clapping, right? Because they were having
Right,
to
yeah.
wait for answers. So when they'd have like a slide where you're just reviewing features, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, and then they'd wait and you clap. And if we're covering it, that gives us time to type it all down or tweet or do whatever we need. But when it's a fully rehearsed and fully pre-shot video, that those time instances weren't there. And so from a purely like journalist perspective, it was more annoying. But that's not who they're aiming for. They're just aiming for end people watching the video, right?
Yeah, and also kind of behind the scenes for us is that we've got years and years of experience of planning out how do we cover one of these keynotes ordinarily, which usually relies on like one or two people in attendance, but that's kind of like the least valuable piece of the team because of Wi-Fi issues and networking issues and everything. There's like a little bit of benefit to having someone in the room with like relaying information sooner. This time there was like you didn't have the effect of on Twitter. There are people in attendance who are like sharing things a few seconds before it's the live stream. But we did the same rhythm of everyone knows what they're covering in advance. So here comes this section, here comes that section, and then in rewatching it, it feels perfectly fine in how it's paced because it's like here's this thing, and I haven't rewatched the whole thing yet since the day it was shown the first time, but. And just starting to do that it definitely feels like a much more digestible pace than you'd have in previous years. So I, for one, am now concerned about how future years will go in comparison.
I was going to say, do you think they'll do it again? Like choose to do it?
It's I don't know. I think they should, but like because it serves more people better than just who can be in a keynote, but also I think that special events, in a future environment where they can hold them again safely, I think there's also a certain value in that and momentum and enthusiasm and everything.
Yeah, there is like a kind of magic in doing it live, right in front
Yeah.
of real people and doing a demo that that has a risk of going wrong. Like that's part of the fun, right? We've seen Apple screws up on occasion. Like I think the one that comes to mind most recently was when they did the Face ID demo for the iPhone 10, right? And Craig, it was the phone was like pre-locked or something, so he was like, "Whoa!" and then they had to redo it over and stuff. And like that shows that the legitimacy of the whole operation. And if it was only pre-recorded videos that are never going to be wrong from here on out, it does kind of lose some of the sparkle, if you know what I mean. Like, and I think in general, I would probably prefer them to go back to standard live keynotes, but as a developer, the sessions that they've been running throughout the week, that format is way better how it is now because they have all the videos already done. They're all perfect and cut down beautifully. There's no random like waiting around for the speaker to move across and change the slide over to get to the laptop to do the demo to walk back. All the videos come out at the same time of the day. Like I think for WWDC next year, they should definitely consider just pre-recording all the session videos, and then that frees up more time for them to do like hands-on labs and stuff if people are getting back in person. So there's still reason to attend because right now they're having to do the hands-on labs and the interview stuff over video chat essentially.
WebEx, right?
Yeah, WebEx, yeah. But it's like having all the videos just drop at the same time every day is so much better and the videos are much higher quality. The keynote itself, like Apple is such a like demo-driven and presentation-driven company. It's hard. I'd be really surprised if they did like a Nintendo and moved to this kind of style full time. Maybe they'll do some announcements like that. Like you could imagine them like for what they did with the iPad Pro in March, they could have done like a streamed video for half an hour where they were talking about all the cool features of the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard and stuff. Like a kind of public announcement, kind of what they do when they do embargoes of press, right? They don't always have to do it behind the scenes. They could make that stuff more public. But for things like WWDC or the iPhone keynote, I'd like them to go back to live when it obviously is safe to do so.
Yeah. They definitely nailed it this time though. Like
as good as it was. As good as it was. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get into what happened in the keynote, and kind of just go through in chronological order. So kick us off.
Yeah. So just before we start with iOS 14, let's get a ad out the way.
Cool. Okay.
So Happy Hour this week is brought to you by Clean My Mac X. It's the all-in-one cleaning and optimizing solution for your Mac. It's a single utility that takes care of your Mac's health. It cleans, it's a performance monitor, so much more. You can scan for outdated junk files, easily work out what is using up all your hard drive space, and it can make a virtual visual map of how your storage is distributed across your files and folders. You can declutter cache files, logs, mail attachments that you no longer need, and so much more. It detects it all, and you could potentially save gigabytes of space with a single click. Because unfortunately, when you remove a Mac program, sometimes it leaves little like preference files around or caches that your computer, no longer really uses or it needs. But there isn't a good way to clean that craft out using built-in macOS tools, and that's where Clean My Mac X is to the rescue. And it's designed to be super easy to use. The app will show you step-by-step explanations for every single component, so you can be fully confident in the tweaks that you're making to your system. And the real-time malware monitor scans your Mac for threats and notifies you right in time as soon as it detects something. Clean My Mac makes it easy to optimize your system and run your Mac at peak performance, just like it did when you got it out of the box on day one. Clean My Mac X is available in the Mac App Store and on MacPaw's website. Go to macpaw.com/9to5 to get Clean My Mac X with a 30% discount, valid until July. That's macpaw.com/9to5. Thanks to MacPaw and Clean My Mac X for sponsoring Happy Hour.
Awesome. Yeah, so I took notes like during the keynote until it was time to write my stories on Apple Watch stuff, and that's when I was like, okay, now I'm not on my notebook anymore. But the first thing I wrote was like Tim Talks, and it was that introduction. It was like it was such a highly produced way to begin the keynote, and like show the theater and everything, and it was so, I think there was no question of is this live or not live, because like what answered that question was the production value was so high.
And the transitions. Like as soon as they started doing some cuts with the camera, and I was like, maybe the Tim bit's live, but then it was pretty clear as soon as they started cutting to other people back and forth, it was all pretty done. Yeah.
So I'm gonna call this whole thing Tim Talks. So I think it was well done. iOS 14. They cut to Craig. He's in the part of Steve Jobs Theater before you go into the theater room. And then he begins to introduce iOS 14. So let's go down the list of what we have there.
Yeah, so the first thing was what they call the app library. And this is kind of like the app drawer that you get on Android, because it's essentially a way to take app icons out of your home screen, or to just completely hide pages that you no longer like organize or already use, because they kind of admitted that, after like page 1, page 2, page 3, people download so many apps and they don't bother organizing the rest of it. So it just goes on pages and pages endlessly. And so the app library is their kind of attempt to solve that. And what it essentially is like a final page on your home screen that sorts the rest of your apps that aren't visible on those pages that you've manually arranged into like automatic categorization. So you have kind of automatic folders, you have recently added, you have Siri suggestions, and then like all your Apple Arcade games go in one little folder. And it's quite a clever UI, because you have like 3 apps in each folder, which are like your recently used ones, and you can just tap them and they instantly launch. And then you've got like a little like more bubble or swirl that you can click on, and then it basically like expands into a full screen folder of everything in that category. And then there's like a search button with like an A to Z list, kind of what we reported earlier in the year, right? And then if you want to, you can manually remove apps from your home screens. You just like go into jiggle mode, say move to app library, and then it will disappear from your home screen, but it's not deleting the app. It's just making it in this separate section only that you can only get to through the app library, or just using, Spotlight search. And then they have this kind of really nice shortcut where you can just basically hide an entire page of apps at the same time. So say if you organize page 1 and page 2, but you don't really care about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can long press on the little page indicator at the bottom, and then it comes up into this like edit page UI, and you just click like 3, 4, 5, hide. You just uncheck them, and then all the apps from those pages get funneled into the app library instead. It's an interesting solution to the problem. Obviously, we'll be doing a lot of like iOS 14 impressions as the weeks go on. Initially, I don't know, I kind of feel like you're just trading pages of unorganized apps for a different page of unorganized app. Like, I'm not sure if you're actually gaining much, because I feel like as soon as you're on the app library screen anyway, like, why don't you just search for it by pulling down and just typing the name of the app in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So my takeaway on this, I mean, to talk about both app library and widgets, you sort of need to acknowledge that in the mobile phone space, Android's been doing a version of both of these things for a long time. Even if widgets go back to dashboard on the Mac. So the app library, so the alphabetical list thing, it takes, I think right now, like structurally, it's tacked on to the home screen where you've got your first page, and they didn't change like page 0. That's still the today view, as they call it, and it shows widgets by default, including the new style and the old style. And only the new style can come to your home screen, so off of the today view. So you've got page 0, you've got page 1, through however many, and then the last page is the app library. And I think it's too, even if you only have like one home screen and then app library, it is too many steps to go to the alphabetical list at that point. Like what I would like to see is you pull down from the home screen, home screen 1, and then you go to app library, I think.
Yes. Yeah, because that has a search field in it, right? Because now when you pull down, you go to the old search experience, which just has the search field, and then it has the series suggestions.
Yeah, which can be a widget on page 0, 1, pull down, like it's all over the place now.
And they have series suggestions in the app library itself as one of the folders.
That's
one of the
right.
fake folders is a series suggestion. So
yeah,
that is definitely something that I noticed as well. It's like, so you've got, like, you pull down to search, but then you can go all the way to the end of your home screens to find the app library. You can also search there. So if they unified those together, it doesn't really seem much reason for them to be split apart.
That would be so cool. It's like you've got your home screen, and there's no like indicator on the bottom. There's like pagination, and there's little dots for it. There's not one for app library, and this is all in beta 1. Who knows how it'll change? But I think that's one of the pieces of feedback that I hope they hear over the summer, is that like that pull down needs to go to app library where you've got those new collections, and then you tap search, and then you've got the alphabetical list order. Because what I'm finding in the last few days is that it's cool to have all that automatic assortment, but I'm also finding it more efficient to still type in like 2 letters of an app name, and then that's how to get to it.
Yeah, you just search on that main screen rather than bothering to go all the way to the end.
Yeah, no, I do love the idea of app library, because like what it is we've had folders on iOS since
iOS 4.
iOS 4, right? So long ago. And with app library, it's like they've taken folders, and folders never really changed for bigger screen iPhones or iPads, and it's just like groups of apps.
Well, they used to have, because it used to be on like the iPhone 4, it was 4 across, 3 down, right? And so now they've changed it to 3 by 3, but you can have unlimited pages.
Yeah, that's the only change to folders.
Yeah.
The way that the collections in the app library are, like the way that they look, it feels like if they just were to take away folders or update folders into like folders 2, this is what we'd get. And so I think for most people, this new way of doing things is going to be a leap forward and much better. For me, I've always had page 1 be the apps that I use the most, and then page 2 be just folders, like 8 folders or so, organized alphabetically and by category. So it was like my own app library. And now I kind of wish that I could name these folders what I want, or the app library collections what I want. Like have the suggested, recently added, arcade, test flight. Those are really, really neat categories to be automatically put together. But like in health and fitness, for example, they've got my dog collar tracker by a company called Fi.
You can't customize the folders they make for you. It's just all fixed and automatic. You can't rearrange the order of them. You can't do anything.
And there's like reference and reading gets truncated on an iPhone 11 Pro, and it's like, but visually they're much more functional. They're larger. 3 out of the 4 tiles on the folder preview are tappable apps. I mean, it's like the app there, and then the little like 4x4 grid within the 4x4. That's how you open the folder, and just the animation of opening the folder is way more modern and polished than the old way. So I hope that they kind of like use this as like, this is the first thing we're going to do, but then you get some more options in terms of like what you can do here. Because it's really cool.
Even if you drag, like if the app library just stays the drunk drawer page, but you could like drag out one of those folders and just put them next to your icon, so they'd almost be like a widget, right? So you could just have all the Apple Arcade automatic folder just be a widget that you could just tap in and reveal. They have a lot of scope to expand there.
Yeah. So I quite like it, and I think just like big picture, it's that this it's important for Apple not to copy Android features, but to create an environment for switchers where they're comfortable, and if a good idea is a good idea, then to bring it, to take it, not avoid it because it's somewhere else. But I definitely think this is like, this is Apple's take on what's happening on Android phones, and I hope it goes further than what they've got today, because I'm already finding like, oh, I wish it worked a little bit different, than what they've done so far.
Yeah, it's like the classic thing, isn't it? Where you wait so long for major updates, and like, this is the biggest update to the home screen since folders, which is literally a decade ago.
Yeah,
and we're already want more.
When they showed like the history of the home screen, it was like the home screen of the iPhone 1, and they showed like modern iOS, but it was like features that came from ancient iOS, and then they like took things like suggestions on the lock screen as like major changes to the home screen. It's like, I guess, but this is really it.
Yeah, obviously the thing people are most talking about is the widgets, right? And
yeah.
Yeah,
and
again,
when somebody asks me like what's the biggest change in iOS 14, like there's a lot of stuff there, but like I think visually like what you see on your home screen is what you're going to interact with the most, and so I say widgets because it's just like this is it. This is the
and it's important to note that by default the app icon layout does not include any widgets still at all. They're still hidden on that page 0 page.
For now, yeah.
For now, maybe they'll change it, but for at least as it is in the current beta, the app icons are laid out on the first page by default, and you have to like proactively drag out a widget to actually put it there.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong default because it's not as discoverable as if like, whoa, there's now a widget there. And they've got this widget called Smart Stack, and you can also stack any widgets together where they're like swipeable. You can kind of carousel through them. But in marketing images, they show this sort of like, here's a widget, here's 4 app icons, next row, 4 icons, here's a widget, and it looks nice. I think something like that might need to become the default, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does, because right now it's like you've got to put it together, or maybe it's that they don't want to break everyone's home screens, and it would just be on a new install. But you're right that if you do like reset home screen layout, it goes back to the widgets are over here and the icons are over here, and you've got to merge them together. There is like a default set of widgets though, so like if you ever were to reset your home screen, it puts your home screen page 1 on like Apple's order of their apps, and then everything else goes alphabetical. They've never touched what happens to the widgets there, and now the widgets get reset to like what they want to show you too.
Yeah. And I think like the weather is like a perfect example, right? Because the smallest widget is basically just like a 2x2 app icon. It's just an app icon that's slightly bigger.
It's the size of 4 app icons, right?
Size of 4 app icons, yeah.
Yeah.
So in a future like default home screen arrangement, why have the static weather icon there when you can have the widget instead, right?
Right, yep.
And I feel like the weather is the one of the leading reasons why people want widgets. It's why I wanted widgets for ages. I just want to see the weather on my home screen. Like half the widgets in the widget library I'm never going to use because they're just unnecessary, right? Like I don't care about seeing music albums on my home screen, but calendar maybe, weather for sure. They're like each person's going to have their 1 or 2 widgets that they really, really want to have, and they're so important to them, right? And so they can lay them out. And I feel like weather is a good enough default that could actually make the default set at some point.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because that's what I want. As soon as I upgraded to iOS 14, I was like, well, I don't want this stupid weather icon anymore. I want the widget. And so what I did is I long pressed on the icon, and I was looking, because in the old version, they'd put like the widget above when you run on the little like force press menu, the long press menu. It would show you a widget above. Well, that's gone now. It only shows you the menu. And because what I was thinking in my head was, I'll just long press on the icon, and then surely there's just going to be like replace widget button. So it would just swap the icon out for the widget. But that flow doesn't really exist. So it's kind of awkward now because you have to like hold on the icon, then you have to delete the app, but not actually delete the app, send it to the app library. Then you can swipe to the home screen page. Then you can find the weather app. Then you can pick the 2x2 one, and then you can drag it out. So there are some like onboarding steps they can probably improve there. Because also once you put a widget on your home screen, you can't change the size of it. You just have to delete the widget and go and get it again from scratch, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
And
they do have like a way to change widgets. So it's a couple of things. I'm doing like 3 widgets on the home screen, and so it's like what you'll see in Apple's defaults, where it's like a widget, 4 icons, a widget, 4 icons, and that's the whole home screen. But I'm doing. They've got this concept of like stacking widgets. So they have one that's called Smart Stack, and that's just like every widget that Apple makes in one. You know, it isn't really intelligent. It's just like this is all that we make, and have at it.
It's supposed to change which ones are visible to you depending on your needs, but we'll see. Obviously,
Yeah,
how well that actually
there's a
works.
very small number of widgets that are in that category. So like when to exactly, yeah. But what I like is the small widget size where it's 4x4, and then to stack those where I've got a slot that I do for a widget. And so in like the top left corner, I'm doing calendar, and then I'm looking at. I don't invest in stocks, but I'm using the stocks widget because I'm looking at like what is happening with Virgin Galactic or Peloton or Apple. So as company, and then launch that, go to Apple News from there. So I've got that there. The next one I've got, I'm kind of doing these as like related to each other. Weather, like you mentioned, the activity rings, and that's another thing where like if they did like live app icons. Activity rings is something people ask about. It's like, why can't that be a live version of your rings? Well, now it can be. It just happens to take up 4 icons, but for that reason, it's like, okay, I can swipe through these, and it's not just like one widget for the sake of 4 in the place of 4 icons. It's like I can do multiple in this place, and I'm doing maps there as well as like my Maps app launcher, and it's just kind of neat to see that the icon for it is where you are. And then I am doing some media ones as my third widget on my last row, which is podcast stuff. So it's like you're currently playing podcast if you're doing that, or recently played. The last thing with music, and then photos where it recommends memories. So it's like there's like my media widgets.
Yeah,
so,
the photos one's nice.
Yeah. And then on I've got a second page where I've got like battery, and then topic and news, and then a few more app icons there, and then that's it. But I'm happy with the amount of kind of what you can do so far. Like you mentioned, you can't resize them from the widget. You've got to like go into the add page and add a new one of that size. With the stacked widgets though, you can edit. You long press one and you get like the little pop out menu, and you can edit the stack where you rearrange the order of those widgets. You can turn off Smart Rotate where it tries to be intelligent about what to show you. And if it's a news widget, you can select the topic there. So by default, I think it picks a topic for you, and then you can go and change that or remove that part of the stack. So they do have like the infrastructure for where would you change the size of a widget. It would be in that menu, I think.
Yeah, like when you like edit a widget, it kind of flips around and shows you the back, and they have like the options for customizing the data, but also there it would probably make sense to just a quicker way to change, small, medium, large instead of having to start over from scratch.
And all of this in beta 1 in the beta season is that it's all the first party widgets, and Apple's not made like a widget for every app in every context, and we don't have any third party widgets yet. But I think
some widgets are still to come in later seeds. Like they show on the marketing website a clock widget where you just get the clock but bigger.
Yeah.
And that's not in the current beta. So there's a lot of stuff
we'll
to come. I will say though, I'm really happy with like how the whole thing looks. The animations are really cool. When you drop a widget down, they will kind of like ripple around it. It's very reminiscent of like the dashboard animations of old, right?
Yeah.
And
that went away.
Yeah, sadly it did go away, but they kind of brought it back, and it's really, really nice. What do you think about the fact that like the widgets can't have interactivity? They can only launch the app. So they're kind of basically like complications, right? Like they're like watch complications brought to the home screen.
They use that framing too when they introduced widgets. It was like, we've learned from the Apple Watch kind of thing, which I thought was initially like their way of saying we're not copying Android, or the Mac. But I mean, they killed widgets on the Mac. I mean, you've got widgets in the Today view, and now there's Control Center, but or that notification center over there. But I think it's okay. I think as long as they update reliably, we're in the beta season right now. So, for example, the activity widget is often incorrect, and the current weather location keeps defaulting to Cupertino, even though I've given permission to use my location. But that's just beta stuff. As long as they do update reliably and in time, and like I look at my watch and it's the same as what shows, for activity rings as the widget, and it gets the opportunity to refresh, I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, like watch complications are never out of date. Like you never look at your activity rings and they're wrong, right?
Right.
At the moment, when you look on the iPhone, the activity rings can be a bit delayed, and they obviously have like performance policies and stuff to stop a widget from updating too frequently. But clearly, for stuff like the activity rings, the API is designed so that at the start of the next day, they can be told to refresh and go back to 0. Or if you've had it plugged in, they should be able to refresh more frequently. And some of that stuff is clearly just a bit buggy at the moment, but they'll get there. That's fine. I think I think for year one, not having any interactivity at all is fine. It does preclude some kind of like I bet a popular widget on Android is like a now playing widget, which just shows you're currently playing music and you play pause or a next track button. Kind of basically what you get in Control Center.
I mean, Apple could do that and just not allow other apps to do it.
Sure, yeah. So maybe they do that, but stuff of that domain, right? Like I don't think you want super complicated widgets, but maybe some stuff could benefit from like a button or two. But again, for a year one 1.0 situation, I think it's fine. And currently the old style widgets are still available. Mm-hmm. On that page 0, they're stuck at the bottom. You can't drag them out between your iPad icons like anything.
So I'm only using that page for the old widgets, ones that I actually use. So like I've got Netatmo for the weather station there, and then deliveries, and that's like and now that you can take icons from your home screen and then put them in the app library only, then widgets can replace icons as launchers, and so it all kind of fits this model of like what you see on the home screen. It may or may not have information, but it's how you launch the app. And so that's what I'm doing with the old school widgets too, is I don't have the icon for those apps on the home screen anywhere. That's how I launch the app. But usually I can see what I want to see without having to launch the app, and that's the widget. So.
Yeah, indeed. Another thing I'm really happy they brought to the iPhone this year is picture-in-picture.
Yeah, so they called that part of the home screen redesign.
Yeah. So they did this first on the iPad in 2015, right, with iOS 9. Because that's when they started doing like multitasking specific changes for iPad. But for whatever reason, it took them 5 years to bring it to the phones. And, it's been a request from me and you for a while, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and, loads of Android phones do it already. And it's just a nice feature that lets you easily multitask between watching a video and doing something else. Like I can watch a video. If you message me, I can just switch the messages and type back and the video doesn't get paused. It just carries on playing in a little box. And you can just flick the box around to different corners and just carry on. It also works for like FaceTime calls.
That's where it matters for me the most.
Yeah.
Because I'm always seeing, not just me, but like as the person on the other end of the call, that someone that I called to FaceTime with will then browse on their phone and I'm looking at paused, Mm-hmm. And so now that's not the case. If they have 14, then they pip. And then also they continue offering their video too without that paused interaction.
Yeah, and especially when you've got bigger phones like the 6.1-inch phone, the iPhone 11 Max, which is 6.5, and then later this year they're going to do 6.7. Only having one app on the screen at a time does start to feel limiting, and so stuff like picture-in-picture offers a really nice way of just adding basic multitasking features that people use every single day. Like loads of people are watching videos on their phone and they just want to do something else really quick, and so it's a really nice way of like adding multitasking to the iPhone without making it super complicated. So I'm really happy that that's finally arrived on the phone.
Yeah, it was funny when they showed it like the picture-in-picture, the pip pushed off screen, and they're like, it even keeps playing sound. It's like this is how it works. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, we've done this before. We've been this isn't a new rodeo.
Yeah. Next up, I suppose, would be Siri, and it's a pretty good year for Siri. I mean, it isn't in like what Siri can do, but it's in how Siri's presented, I think, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, so they had that line where it's like, Siri's learned 20 times more facts than 3 years ago, which means they're incorporating changes that we've already seen, right? So it's not just news this year. But it was funny, they showed some like sample questions like, how do hybrid cards work, for instance? And so I just asked my Siri the exact same question and it didn't know. So some of it's still, rolling out and stuff, but they are at least addressing, like this is the first time in a while where they've had an Apple representative come on the stage and say, look, we are making Siri better in this way, and this is what's happening. It's not a giant leap. It's not some like quantum jump. But, paying attention to it is very nice because previously, whenever we've had like a Siri segment, it's just been about how well their new voice can synthesize and make it sound like a human, right? Which is what nobody really cares about. They want to hear like the intelligence of Siri. And so they did address that. They also allow that you take audio messages over Siri. So rather than just transcribing to text, you can do just a voice message, which is nice on occasion.
I haven't tried this with Carplay, but Carplay had an update in iOS 13 where for the first time you could play an audio message, which to me, like the context is you're driving, you don't want to be fooling around with dictation that can be unreliable or like having to correct it 5 times before it gets it right. So in my 2014 review of Carplay on iOS 8.1, I wrote, this needs to be able to send audio messages and play them back. And some update to 13 added playback, but you still couldn't send. And so for me, like this addition to Siri is really like solving that problem for CarPlay that I had in 2014 of I'm driving, dictation is failing every time for whatever reason, complexity. Let me just record my voice and send it over as a message so that person can play it back. And now you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. And then like the biggest change for Siri this year, it seems, is they've done like a UI refresh. So previously Siri was like this full screen experience and it would blur the background and, your conversation would appear above. And what they've done now essentially is that it slightly dims the background, but mostly it just adds like this circle, which is the Siri like globe to the bottom of the screen. Yeah. And then you ask a question and then the answer just like comes in from the top, kind of like a band notification. That's not actually a notification. So you kind of be able to like retain the context of what you're doing while you're asking Siri a question, which is something I've actually asked for in a previous episode of this show. Although it is a bit odd in beta 1, like you can't actually carry on using your app while you ask Siri a question, either on the phone or the iPad. And like on the iPad, Siri's just this tiny little globe in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you ask it a question and you like, so let me say, let me look up this calculation while I'm also still scrolling Twitter. As soon as you put your screen on the screen to scroll the Twitter app, it cancels and dismisses Siri completely. So it kind of defeats the point. Like you can refer to what's on the screen, but you can't actually interact with the app while you're actually asking Siri a question, which is like, exactly what you can do on the Mac. At least you can in Catalina.
Yeah, it's like touch without multi-touch. Multi is very important there.
And again, it is beta 1, so that's the kind of stuff they can change. Because the way I was imagining it was working, it was like it would come up on the screen and then it wouldn't dismiss till you like did the home button gesture to swipe it off, if you see what I mean. But the fact that you just literally like touch the app underneath and it goes away just seems a bit silly to me.
Yeah.
But the UI is quite nice, and it's interesting that by default now they hide the transcription, so you can't even see what you're saying and what it thinks you're saying. There's an option and a setting to turn it back on again, but it was kind of disorientating the first time I did it. I was like, okay, it's heard me, I guess. Oh, there's the answer. Okay, it was right. But it was kind of funny that now they feel so confident in being able to transcribe correctly, they don't even show you what they thought you said.
And there's no more opportunity for screenshotting, bad transcriptions and answers.
Yeah,
because you can't screenshot an audio interaction unless you turn it back on.
That's a fair point. Yeah, and you can turn it on if you're really like sensitive to that stuff when you want it.
That's right. But at that point, you'll have to re-ask your question if you want to screenshot it and make a meme.
And as rumored, they did introduce a translate app.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. It does offer offline translation. It's very similar to like the Google Translate app that you can get in the App Store today, but obviously it's Apple's solution. You can do it offline. I think it has fewer languages than the Google version because I think they said 11? English, Mandarin, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, and Portuguese and Russian. So a pretty decent set of languages, but not like I'm pretty sure Google Translate does like 50 languages or something insane. But for a step 1, it's pretty good. And they have like the conversation mode where you can turn it sideways and then I can talk in English and it will translate it into what the other person's talking. They can talk back in their foreign language and it will do it automatically. So it seemed pretty neat. Again, we'll have to wait for like real world evaluations of how good is the quality of the translations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before you could ask Siri like as an inquiry, how do you say something in Spanish, and it would like play it back for you. But it wasn't a translate interaction app like it is, like Translate is. And when I was at Disney World like over a year ago, I saw a staff member interacting with a customer in a different language, and that's how they were using Google Translate to like go back and forth. And so now it's built into the phone. You don't have to go and add it to it. So that's neat.
Yeah, and it does use the network if the internet's available, and if the network's not available, then it does the offline only version. If you're like super sensitive about privacy, if you go into settings, translate, there is an option which says basically always use the offline only translation, but the quality of the translations will not be as good because the server ones are better.
Yep. The icon is not great.
The icon is pretty bad. Yeah. At least it's not a white background, but it's not. It's only a slight tier above that on the quality list.
Black background. So, but yeah. What's next? Messages, right? Yeah. Messages. It's okay. Widgets and messages. This is like the two things that people are going to interact with the most, I think, and really get out of iOS 14. I can just say from using it, the features that I've already started to use that were presented in the keynote is pinning conversations to the top of the screen so that they're always above the other ones. I'm really enjoying that. One way I'm using that is that if it's someone who I don't talk to often, but it's important that I talk to them, then pinning them is a good way to have them up there because otherwise they'd be at the top of the list anyway if it was like frequent conversations. So like I don't message my mom all the time, but like it's an easier way to put her up there now. And then
It's almost like VIPs, right?
yeah. So that's neat. And then with group chats, being able to, it's so minor, but being able to add like your own picture to the group chat and like name it like that is it's cool. And they've done a good job with the UI of it. Like if someone responds in a group chat, then their avatar will be like around the picture of the group chat, and they show when they're typing in one of the pinned messages and what they've said if they've sent the message. So there is some cool stuff there. Someone in the chat,
pinning UI kind of reminds me of like Instagram stories or like Snapchat stories because it's just little circles with the profile pictures.
Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned that they wish that you could pin the conversation to the bottom, and I think that must be because phones are, in part the phones are big, and so one thing I picked up on this is that with widgets, like your icons are still on the top of the home screen by default, like you can't just put them anywhere on your home screen, but you can bring down important ones by putting like a big widget up top, and it's kind of that way with pinned messages too, where if like there's someone that you don't chat with frequently, but you want to pin them, it can put the ones that you use the most in better reach. So
yeah, you want like a static toolbar that can just hold the icons rather than being always all the way at the top of the screen. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And they have inline replies now, so you don't have to like always respond to the message at the bottom. You can go up a few and it kind of links them together. Kind of like, impromptu threading type of situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have mentions, obviously. So if you've got like a busy group chat, you can turn off notifications in general. But if you get mentioned with your name, then it will send you a notification. So they are bringing a bit more sophistication to the group chat like service of iMessage.
Yeah. And we'll get to the Mac, version of messages. It's this. But you can kind of look at that and say, like, they've had some features on the Mac messages that got replaced. And I think being alerted when you're mentioned is one of those things. And so that could be an influence on, like, why do this now? That was one of the things they wanted to have on the Mac, to get in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the reply UI is interesting. It's kind of clever, but it's also, I don't know. I have to spend more time with it to really know what I think about, like, the UI work on it. But the idea is fine.
The mentioning interface is different in the keynote than what you've got on the device too, because you've got to like at and put their name on beta 1. You can type their name and it'll like show a different color, but in the keynote it pops up with their picture or something like that.
Yeah, it does like autocomplete. Yeah,
and it isn't there on the beta 1 yet, so I imagine this gets more polished over time. But I think we've seen like with Slack, you can do threads very badly and people will not like it or use it. Whether they've got these replies in line, it's once you figure out like where the lines are going and how it's supposed to work, it can be useful, especially in a group chat, or if like you're in the UK and so you're it's every night I'm messaging you and you wake up to like 5 things from me in the morning, you can reply to the specific things and context.
Yeah, because normally like if I go to sleep, you'll send me like a tweet, then you'll say some random comment, and then 4 hours later you'll say something else, and to be able to reply to both those independently is actually quite nice.
Yeah, indeed. So messages, good update there.
Yeah, and then we had the Maps update, which is obviously quite ironic because at the moment nobody's going anywhere. But
which they addressed in a good way in the keynote. It was like, we know that the world's different now, but it won't always be this way. And when it gets back to normal, here's Maps, CarPlay, and something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they did address it in quite a clever way. And so they first said that obviously the like Apple Maps 2 rollout finished in the US last year, and they promised it was coming to more countries this year. They honed in a bit and said that will be the UK, Ireland, and Canada sometime later this year. And then they got Meg Frost up, who talked about the like new UI features of the app, and they're doing like travel guide kind of stuff, which is like editorial recommendations of places in certain cities. They're doing collaborations with local city planner stuff. So that's kind of interesting if you're just like going to somewhere new and looking for stuff to do and you're looking for inspiration. I tried to find one of these guides, but I think they're only in like the US at the moment, so it's quite limited. But baby steps, they'll roll it over time. And as an individual, you can even make your own guides. Like I can make a guide for you if you were coming to the UK. Yeah. And because you can like share them around. You can't make them like public, but you can share them, with like friends and family.
It's cool. And that part kind of builds off of the collections feature from last year. And so I've been using that every time when you could travel and safely, I would make a trip, and like every place we tried and we liked, I added to the collection, so we'd go back there. And so now you can kind of be like the curator of a guided, a visit. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, they're
The,
doing cycling directions now.
yeah, it's I think it's well done. They called it like their top requested feature. It's just limited to a select number of cities. So, as maps as it goes for maps, it's how it's typical. But it seems to be well done. So they said New York. I mean, this covers a lot of area. New York, LA, San Francisco, and then China, including Shanghai and Beijing. So it isn't like you can just like take maps and then get biking directions anywhere. You've got to be in a select location. But the way they showed it, where you get this way, if you don't mind taking your bike up some stairs, you can save time, or you can look to avoid stairs altogether. Sort of like you can avoid tolls on a highway for directions. It looked neat,
And they show like a little graph of the elevation and stuff. It's
yeah. Yeah, which is an important piece of what to expect on a route when you're cycling. So it does look nice. It's going to be a slow rollout, it seems, though.
Yeah, and they're doing like electric vehicle routing now, so you can sync up with your car and you can tell it like what type of charger your car has on compatible models. I think they said BMW and Ford.
Right. Yeah. So notably in this and the Carplay section, you've got to leave out Tesla because there's not a partnership there. But it's useful. And Tesla has its own solutions for these things anyway.
Yeah, obviously, if you have a Tesla, you can just use their mapping and it will tell you where to go to their chargers and stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in more general, it makes sense to put it into like the Maps app too. So
for
it's a
all
nice
the other
feature.
companies that aren't Tesla, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're like marking congestion zones in big cities. So like in London, obviously, we have the congestion area, and so they're going to like shade that on the map, and you can know if you're like allowed in there and stuff. And there are cities in like China, I think Beijing, where you're only allowed in the city center on certain days. So to stop overpopulation, overcrowding, they only let like people's surnames who begin with A, B, and C on this day, and rotate it around like that. And they're even integrating that in, so you can type in your like profile ID, and it'll tell you, okay, on these days you can actually go here, right? So it's doing more localization, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, that's a foreign concept to me, but it is a cool feature of Maps for a big user base.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and then CarPlay, something that's I've been using CarPlay since 2014 in October when it first came to an aftermarket display before it even came to like a new car you could buy. So I've kind of been obsessed with like tracking its progress over the years, and in 5.5 years' time, we've now added wallpapers. So there's one thing that we reported that hasn't come out yet, which is this new feature of interacting with wallpapers on iOS and having third-party wallpapers integrated with settings. Not here yet. It's one of those things where features get turned on and off as they're completed. And maybe this was tied to that, but I also think that last year when they introduced light mode for CarPlay, that you took the background from being just black like the first iPhone to being white, and a lot of the icons looked really bad in that way, and so did the dashboard view of like the kind of CarPlay version of like widgets that are fixed in place. And so by doing this, all of a sudden you can use light mode and not have a harsh home screen. If you also get the benefit of like if you have dark mode, you can have a dark mode wallpaper, and you can't do things like have your custom wallpaper on CarPlay, so you can't just have like a picture of something that you like. It's independent from your phone, so at first I thought it was like connected because it was the same default as what that was on the phone, and then I realized that you got to go into settings and change it. I think it's like 5 or 6 options there, and it's just like the default iOS 14 wallpapers basically. They react to light mode and dark mode, but it's a small thing, but like it makes a big difference in terms of like how it feels and fresh and everything. And also stock infotainment systems typically have wallpapers too that are pretty bad, but at least there's something there. And now CarPlay does too. And I could see in the future them opening it up to be like other wallpapers and that kind of thing. But
yeah, and they're expanding like what CarPlay apps can be. They're doing apps for like parking and electric vehicle charging and ordering food. So you can like, I don't know, have like a McDonald's app on your dashboard while you're like, you can like order your meal as you go into the parking lot or something, I guess.
It's kind of nebulous as to like what those things mean. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have a good idea of that yet.
And then their big feature for this kind of like CarPlay section was Car Key. And this is
which is like
talking about for a while.
Yeah, which is kind of separate from the CarPlay experience, really.
Yeah.
Uh, it's that they've got this whole system for virtual car keys, where they can be distributed over iMessage, or you can control permissions with what the car virtual car key can do. But it's meant to use your iPhone as your car key to unlock the car, lock the car back, and then to start it. And I guess there's kind of like two pieces to this. So in our reporting of it and our research on the topic, we learned that this was in development, and we got much of the user interface before it was announced. But also we realized that there's this consortium of manufacturers that are working on the standard, and so it kind of sounds like Apple. What they announced is that they're doing their version of it with BMW and a 2021 BMW, I think i5 series, and that'll be available as an update in iOS 13. But they're also taking what they made and contributing it to the standard, and then there'll be wider adoption through that, and that will be more available later.
Yeah, and it sounds like up front they're going to do cars through NFC, but longer term they want to take advantage of like the U1 chip and ultra wideband and do it that way instead. So you don't even have to take the phone out of your pocket to unlock the car.
And if you look at the consortium that's been working on this, there's 3 phases so far that they published, and I think the first phase is like NFC only, and then it becomes ultra wideband chips, which was published like I think in December. So U1 was there already, but so they're not using that version, and I think it's just that the standard isn't there yet for the cars to adopt. So
Apple said you can expect to start seeing like UWB compatible car key stuff next year. So that's a bit of a wide time frame, especially given that the U1 chip came out last year now, and we're still kind of waiting for a good use of it. But
we saw something interesting, and we'll get to a lot more like tidbits and stuff next week as we kind of unpack this throughout the summer. But one thing we saw so far is that it seems to be for the Apple Watch. I think this is for car key, right? That it's Series 5 only or later?
Yes.
And not Series 4, which has the same chip essentially, and Series 3, which runs the software update.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why that is.
Yeah, that's one of those weird things.
I did think it was cool though when you make the car key, you can like share it to a friend and give them like limited access. So I guess you can say, oh, you can only have it for half an hour, you can only go in this distance or something.
Yeah, this will be really cool in 10 years or so. Like,
you can add it to the list of like gym kit stuff.
Yeah, but with CarPlay, like they showed iOS in the car, and then like a year and a half later or whatever, they showed CarPlay and like released it, and it took forever. But at this keynote, they could say that 97% of cars today in the US have CarPlay, and they just have to exclude Tesla basically, and then a few other brands, I guess. But that's 2014 to now 2020. So in less than 10 years, it's now kind of it's in ads and it's everywhere. Maybe car key will be that, but it could also be one of those like high end things that doesn't. CarPlay is not a high end thing. It's usually in the standard trim or like one level up.
Yeah,
so.
I'm sure wireless phone-based car key activation will trickle down the lineup eventually. It'll just take years to actually get there, so it's widely available.
So we'll see in 2026 what we're talking about with car key.
And when Apple has its own car out, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And then finally, in like iOS, they were talking about app clips, which are essentially you can use a link or you can use a QR code, or they even have their own like custom design QR code stuff, which has a NFC tag built into it. And it basically launches a mini app experience. So rather than having to download a full app to do something quickly, you can download an app clip, which only has like, it's small in file size, and so it downloads really quickly, and then you can do 1 or 2 actions that you need to and carry on with your day. So if you go to like a parking terminal and you need to pay for the ticket, you can just like tap your phone on the NFC reader, it downloads the app clip like immediately, and you can Apple Pay and leave, rather than having to have the app fully installed, go and get it to the app store, mess around with it. And the app clips like automatically delete themselves after a month, and they never go to the home screen, they only sit in the app libraries kind of situation. So basically they're giving you a way to have like transient mini apps to use.
Yeah, this is if you spend time in big cities, you see, it's just as like if you live in a big city, then you kind of have your apps that are in your rotation. But if you just go and visit for something, then you've kind of got to like assemble your visiting apps, and you only need them when you're in town. And oftentimes it's like you've got a really bad network connection then, because towers are slammed and it's hard to get the whole app to download. So this is a great save for this. This is one of those things that we reported on before. I think it kind of went under the radar though, because I was talking about it last week on some different podcast appearances where it's like, what do we expect to see? And for a lot of people, it was news, but I think this was from like March or so. It was out there, but it's just as we expect.
And obviously we have to kind of like just see how people adopt it or whether it gets uptake or not. Like,
yeah.
Because do you remember last year? It was literally like a year ago this time where Apple announced new initiatives for Apple Pay, where you'd be able to like pay for a bike or an EV bike or whatever, or a scooter, just by tapping the phone and then walking off. And that never actually happened. So I think they've kind of funneled that idea into this App Clip stuff.
Yeah, because App Clips benefits from signing with Apple and Apple Pay to skip account creation and credit card input.
Yeah, and you can have like UI and do stuff. Whereas the original pitch last year was just literally just scan it and then that would be it. But that's kind of limiting for, account management and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that announcement wasn't like an Apple event. It was Jennifer Bailey, the head of Apple Pay, at like an e-wallet, gathering of some sort. So that was kind of an odd one. But
you can imagine theoretically that like a restaurant could have an app clip for just like their menu, and you could, because some like fancy restaurants now you order on the app and you don't have to like, go and find a waiter or whatever. And so you could imagine if they put like a little app clip code on the menu that's on your table, you could just scan that and order without you having to like mess around, go to the app store and download the full application. Yeah. So there are uses for it, and I'm sure like this will probably link into AR stuff down the road where you can like scan the AR QR code and it launches augmented reality experiences as well. But we'll have to see if it actually gets play or not, because
I think it will. I think that the Android version, which is called Slices, which is like Apple Slices, it's funny in my head. I think that app clips will be widely adopted, and you don't need 500 app clips. You just need like 12 really popular ones to be useful. And
like I'm sure Starbucks would probably do an app clip for their app instead of everyone having to download it all the time, because it's also just promotion, right? It's like the first time you do it, you scan it, you do a clip, and then you're like, oh, I want that for the next time I go. So then you can like download the full application.
And the Apple Store experience where you can check out with the app. I talked about in the show before, like it used to be a whole process of enter your credit card, and no one wanted to do that. And now if it could be an app clip and an Apple Pay, then it's really seamless, because you can't like take your iPhone without the Apple Store app and check out. You need the Apple Store app. The clip could do that. I also love the idea of scooters. So I've done a lot of like when you go to a big city and they've got the electric scooters out that you can rent. You'll see like 3 different companies with those, and so you'll need all 3 apps based on like what is available. And this will solve that problem too. And then competitively, like, if you have to have a full app or it works with an app clip, then you're more likely to like pick up the one with an app clip if they're like all side by side. So, it's definite reasons to adopt this. I think it'll be popular. All right. Do you want to take an ad break there?
Yeah. Okay. So
cool.
Just before we get into iPadOS, let's take a break and talk about Mac Stadium. They're the provider of cloud solutions that are built on Apple Mac hardware. And as more teams are working from home, having your Mac build infrastructure hosted in the cloud makes it easy to continue with app development, and no need to have someone in the office doing the admin and the maintenance. It's WWDC week. It's for developers. You can just let Mac Stadium do it for you. Whether you need a single Mac Mini or a fully scalable private cloud of Macs, Mac Stadium can help you move your iOS and your Mac app development workflows into the cloud. Do you need a fast, scalable, modern way to run Mac virtual machines? Orca is Mac Stadium's virtualization platform that is purpose-built for exactly this, running iOS, macOS continuous integration. It's built on Kubernetes, and it has plugins for all the popular CI tools. So if you're building apps for the Apple ecosystem, learn more about Mac Stadium at macstadium.com/9to5Mac. And as a special offer for 9to5Mac and Happy Hour listeners, during WWDC week, Mac Stadium is offering half off your first 6 months to a Mac Mini subscription. Just use promo code WWDC2020. Visit macstadium.com/9to5Mac for details. Thanks to Mac Stadium for sponsoring the show.
All right, cool. So iPadOS. This was presented largely by I think Josh Schaefer is his name, and he's
like Craig introed it, and then for the app update stuff, they whittled over to Josh Schaefer.
Yeah, and he leads Swift UI. Is that right?
Yeah, that was interesting. They showed on his
wasn't really a connection there.
Yeah, they said like director of Swift framework, so he's like the Swift UI guy. So I'm not quite sure why he was running the iPad section, but he used to. I know he used to work on the UI kit team, so it's kind of related. But you'd think they would have like a head of iPad now that they have an OS that's literally named iPadOS. But so yeah, I noticed that too. It was a bit strange.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. iPadOS. So last year, got the name changed from iOS to iPadOS because it's this dedicated version that's got features that are unique to the iPad that will never be on the iPhone. And part of that push was to say there will no longer be kind of this TikTok year of iOS gets updated for the phone, and then every other year or every 3 years there's a major iPad update to iOS.
I mean, Apple never said that.
No, but it was implied, and especially in like I think even in like the Craig Federighi like podcast interviews that came after that, it was really pushed. Do you think this year hits the mark of iPadOS having its own name, even though we know it's the same, like, code base is the same? And
Probably not.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty small scale year update for the iPad, and half the features that we just talked about in iOS 14 they don't even work the same, right? So the app library doesn't exist on the iPad, so you can't put an app in a library on the iPad.
The new widgets are there, but they can't go on your home screen. They're only on the little sidebar from last year.
So the stupid little sidebar that they introduced last year, now it can have the new widgets in there, but you can't put widgets among your icons, which is a silly restriction.
And it's beta 1, but they didn't show it either.
Yeah, and if you actually look at the UI of like you drag the widget out of the little sidebar and it kind of like lights up, it's pretty clear they've done it on purpose. Like the behavior is not like accidental. It's like there are technical reasons why it's slightly harder on the iPad than the phone. For a start, obviously, like the app icons can be different sizes, like you have the two layout modes, but that could probably be pretty easily fixed just by having like dynamic metrics for the widgets. The bigger problem is like rotation. So on the iPhone, the grid's fixed, right, and it doesn't go anywhere. Whereas on the iPad, where the widget would have to move around when you went to landscape, and they'd have to preserve the layout of the icons when you went back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So that is a stumbling block. I'm sure it's able to be overcome, but I can imagine them being like, "This is too hard. We'll defer it for later," and that's why it's not there. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The biggest feature that, just looking at my notes, that stands out. Well, there's a few things, but one of the things that is one of the keys is the sidebar on apps like Photos. It becomes more like what you see on a Mac, and you see a lot less of a tab bar, and that's like just that whatever you want to call that approach to making the tablet apps more like desktop apps than like phone apps is kind of the theme of this release. So I mean that does fit under the iPadOS framing. Music gets a big update in that regard. In some ways, better than the Mac version now. But
they revamped like the Files app with this new kind of sidebar approach, and you can collapse everything. And they've improved the navigation. They've kind of bring in like drop-down menus to the iPad, so you can just like long and press and just scroll and let go and do a quick action. So there is iPad-specific stuff, but nothing like fundamentally different, right? Like multitasking hasn't been addressed, for instance.
Yeah.
And the music update is really nice because the music app got absolutely like destroyed in the iOS 7 transition. Like they used to have this really nice experience that would take full advantage of the iPad canvas. Then iOS 7 came along and the music app got stripped down to bare pieces on the iPad. So it's literally just like the phone app scaled up. And they've like done slight adjustments to it in the interim years, but now they actually have like a version of music for iPad that does actually take advantage of the screen. And so you have like the nice sidebar on the left, and you can quickly switch between your library or the different categories or the playlists. And then they have like a full screen now playing experience where you can have the real-time lyrics next to the stuff that's playing. So the music app update is really nice and really welcome for sure. But it does kind of like the overall theme was like, iPadOS is a quiet year this year.
Yeah, we thought that iPadOS 13 was a big year for the iPad. So it was like one of those big tick years. And then in previous years, we'd expect this to be kind of a talk year where it's like just refinements and not major changes. But imagine if cursor support didn't come until 14 and the smart keyboard, Magic Keyboard didn't come until 14 was available. Then I think then we'd think of iPadOS 14 as like a bigger deal. And there were signs that the cursor support stuff was in the works for 14. And then it seems to be that it was ready earlier, and then it became part of 13.
Because they got it out with the 2020 iPad Pro release.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I think if you put those together, then it's more like, just the last 2 years have been pretty good for the iPad.
Yeah, and they definitely tried to trade on that, right? Because in the iPad section, they did a recap of the iPadOS 13.3 features. And they're like, remember the trackpad stuff? That was really cool, wasn't it? Remember
that was never shown at WWDC last year as part of 13. It wasn't like we're planning on doing this next spring. It was just here it is now. So.
I think everyone kind of knew as soon as they started recapping the trackpad stuff, you're like, okay, there isn't going to be loads for the iPad specifically. And they kind of did another trick because they included the update to the phone call UI, like the incoming the incoming phone call was in the iPadOS section, even though, where do people get phone calls? They get them on their phone. But they were like, oh, because you can use it for FaceTime and Skype video, let's put it in the iPad section. This is one of the things I've been wanting, right? Like, you don't want a full screen banner. You don't want it to take over your UI and get in your way. You just want a nice little drop down, just like any other notification, with a button to accept and a button to decline. And that's exactly what they gave us for iPhone and iPad. They put it in iPadOS section just to kind of fill out the features for iPadOS, but clearly it's directed for the phone.
Yeah, it'll be super great on the phone. Yeah, wonderful. On the iPad, the screen's bigger, so it was even dumber, but I agree with how you believe that they presented this for the reason to fill it out. The scribble stuff where you're working with the Apple Pencil and you're using it to sketch or however you're using the Apple Pencil for note taking, and you have a text field that you have to type into. Scribble on the iPad, which is like a phrase that came from the watch, where you type with your finger and draw out characters. On the iPad, it's very similar that you draw out characters with the pencil in a text field. And in like real time, it becomes the text entry. I love this. Like it makes me want to use the pencil a lot more, and I always have it, and I use it regularly. But I definitely get what they're talking about, where you've got to like, what do you do with the pencil, and you've got to like type again, and then go back to the pencil, and now it's more natural to not interrupt your workflow there. And I'm left-handed.
You just write over the text field, and it will handwriting recognition it.
Yeah, and I'm left-handed, and the pencil goes on the right side. Unless you hold the iPad, with the camera on the bottom and the port on top. And so I often get annoyed at like, well, I can't just like snap it right there because this isn't the snap side. So this is going to be really cool. And then there's also like, there's cool text selection and like manipulation stuff with the pencil too, like to scratch out text that like type text or like, text is, whether it was pulled from Scribble or you typed it out, you can draw over it in a text field and that will delete it.
And if you if you go into notes and you write out a paragraph, it can detect that as handwriting and you can select it as if it was typed, but it's actually handwriting. You can change the color, you can cut it around, you can copy it as text. Like, it's a really nice experience for sure.
It reminded me of how the iPadOS 13 had those new ways to like select text with gestures and everything. But they're all like multi-finger based, and it's just I haven't learned them yet. This seemed more natural to me. Like, okay, delete text, scratch it out. There you go. I think those will be more memorable for me and more useful.
Yeah, and if you're doing handwriting, it is kind of stupid that all the nice, cut, copy, paste stuff used to be only reserved for if you actually got the keyboard and typed it out. But now they can use, the handwriting recognition. And it's quite clever. Like, if you have little doodles around, it knows that's just a doodle. It doesn't need to select that bit. It only needs to select the actual words. And they kind of like outline your writing, so you get a nice little indicator of what's actually been selected. And I tried the Scribble stuff the other day, and my handwriting is bad, right? Like I used to have decent handwriting probably like a decade ago, but you just go out of practice, right? Because I barely write anything anymore. And so I was like, wait, let me try and write something. And I was like, okay, well, I can barely read it, but the iPad did actually translate it correctly. So that was pretty impressive. So it did work. It's not perfect, but it was pretty good.
I find myself at a place where for note taking, it's surely just how people, learn and remember things. But I find that like note taking, you're in the keynote, like it was useful for me to take notes. I've got a paper notebook where I write notes during the podcast and think of things I'm going to mention, that you'll say something, I have an idea, I'll write it down, I'll get back to it. I prefer pencil and paper for that reason than like iPad on the screen, because it's like there's a limited text. For one, there's like a limited view, a limited canvas on paper, where the iPad is kind of infinite. But also, I'm used to like text on the screen and like handwriting on paper, and to be able to turn handwritten text into text on the screen It's way better than the old version, which was you either type it out or you write it out, but it's still handwritten on the screen. And like my handwriting on an iPad is not what it is on the paper. So it's kind of inferior in all ways. Now I can see myself using a pencil for note taking, and before you could search your handwritten notes, but there was never that a conversion. And now they've gone the next step of let's turn it into text, in real time.
Yeah, like properly editable text.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and you can even just, like, if you're drawing a shape and you just wait at the end of drawing the shape, it actually, does the proper geometry for you and stuff. And that's stuff that we see in other, note-taking apps on the App Store, but now they've kind of just built into the operating system. So it's, nice little tweaks like that help the pencil experience for sure. And then the other iPad thing they did was they redesigned search. So again, following the trend of non-modal Siri, now you can basically open what looks like Spotlight on the Mac. Is just the floating toolbar, right? The floating text field, and you just type in there, and they've upgraded it with deep universal search of more different things, and you can zoom along. So if you have, and they say that you can access it from anywhere, but I don't think you can do it unless you've got the hardware keyboard attached to do the
I was going to ask about that. Is there a new way to activate it?
I've been swiping, right? And I couldn't find a way to do it. So you still have to command space if you've got a Magic Keyboard or a different keyboard attached to bring it up, and you can just type and go. Yeah.
And then AirPods, it was kind of cool to see AirPods.
Yeah, this was like a surprise, really. We didn't really know about this stuff.
Yeah, both in terms of leaking or in terms of just being a section of the keynote. Yeah. They treated AirPods as its own category. And what's new with AirPods coming this year? Yeah,
so they announced, and none of these two features are in the current beta, so we haven't had any experience trying them yet.
I don't think they'll be in beta.
But they sound cool, right? So they've got supposedly they're going to have automatic switching. So if you're on your phone, then you pick up your iPad to watch something, your AirPods will automatically switch to the right device. You can go to your Mac and it will do the same thing. That could be really cool if it does it intelligently. If it does it in a way that is going against what your actual intent was, and it's going to be annoying. But again, we'll have to see how it works in practice. And then the other thing announced was basically surround sound for AirPods Pro. So they called it spatial audio, but basically they're doing some clever algorithm and clever tracking so that they can play frequencies and supposedly make it sound like the sound's coming from all around you rather than just left and right. And then you could be watching a Dolby Atmos movie and it would project the sounds in the relevant places over your head. And they're using the accelerometers and the gyroscope so if you're wobbling your head around, they keep it fixed in place and stuff. So it sounds very intelligent and very smart. We'll have to obviously wait for it. And I'm sure the spatial audio stuff will be a big play for the AirPods Studio. When they come out, for sure. Because as soon as they announced it, I was like, oh, they're readying up for when they're doing over-ear headphones as well.
Yeah, those are sophisticated enough features that it allows them to market Apple headphones that are not more expensive to make, but they're just more intelligent than Beats headphones with their own set of features. So.
Yeah, and automatic switching is really cool.
It should have worked that way all the time.
It's designed, I love it, but I'm a bit skeptical that it might, some cases, it might be a bit weird. You want it to switch, but it doesn't, or it switches too proactively, and you're just trying to listen to something on your phone, and you just pick up your laptop to type something out, and then suddenly it switches the sound over. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how.
Before AirPods, I used the very first thing before that was I used Bose wireless headphones that could pair to two devices simultaneously. And so, for example, I think if I were playing music from the phone or watching a video on the iPad and then working out with the Apple Watch, it could be paired to the phone and the watch or the iPad and the watch. And so you get the audio from your movie or music from the iPad or phone, and then the watch kicks in with an alert to say you finished your workout, and then it switches to the watch in that moment and then goes back to the phone. I think if they get that down, then this a feature that we lost out on by going to AirPods versus other things. I'm optimistic it'll be cool though, because that's something they've never done. They've had switching, fast switching, but never, people from day one, people have wondered where is this feature to auto switch, and it's been they kind of confused marketing of fast switching with an instant pairing with auto switch.
So. So now they're actually delivering on what people thought they were getting.
Right, indeed.
Yeah.
So that's the AirPods stuff. Let's take another ad break there.
Yeah, our final and third sponsor of the show is LinkedIn. So now more than ever, we need people with the right skills to support our communities. That's especially true of frontline workers who provide care for those most in need. LinkedIn is offering free job posts for healthcare and essential service organizations, those that need to quickly fill critical roles to find people that help us all. If you're a business hiring for one of these organizations, job posts on LinkedIn can help you quickly find the right people. LinkedIn Jobs matches your role with qualified candidates so you can find the right person quickly from its active community of over 675 million members. Get up and running from the LinkedIn Jobs dashboard. Simply start with your company name, job title, and location. LinkedIn Jobs screens candidates for the skills and experiences that you're looking for. It puts your job post in front of the qualified people that meet your requirements, people that you want to hire. LinkedIn Jobs finds people that are not only qualified, but fit in with your company's culture. It does the legwork to find the most qualified candidates so you can focus on hiring the person who will transform your business. So, to post a healthcare or essential service job for free, or if you're in another industry and have hiring needs, visit linkedin.com/happy hour. That's linkedin.com/happy hour. Terms and conditions apply. Our thanks to LinkedIn for sponsoring the show.
All right, let's talk about watchOS 7. This is the software update for Apple Watch. I'm not sure how to kind of characterize the size of it. It has some good
Bigger
stuff.
than the iPad, right?
Oh, sure, okay, bigger than tvOS. you know,
Yeah, it's maybe on the same tier as TV. I don't know. It's interesting. Like,
yeah. Like last year, they defined the size of watchOS 6 by the number of new watch faces. I think it was fair to say. And then you got the Series 5 with always on, and that kind of changed things too. And then they even included another new watch face with watchOS 6 in that update with the Meridian face, right?
yeah.
This time there's the Chronograph Pro Face. There's the extra large face with a new way of presenting the complication. And that's it for watch faces, I think. I think they kind of marketed on the website the new rainbow colors for different faces as
The
new.
price stuff that we talked about before.
Yeah, but that's in watchOS 6 already. So you can't really judge it on the watch faces. And then some of the stuff is like you've kind of got to. It'll be big for apps, but not big for like the beta version of watchOS 7. Specifically,
Yeah, I think I was surprised they only basically announced one new face, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
And it's not even a face that I think most people are interested in, right? Because it's Chronograph Pro. It's basically like Chronograph, but it's got a tachometer in it.
Yeah.
And by default, it just says tachometer across the middle.
Yes.
It's like, who wants that? I don't know. And then you can change it so you only have like a 60-second timer instead. But then it just says 60-second permanently across the middle as well. So it's the most like unappealing face I think they've introduced in a long time. But for me personally, like I don't really know why they did that one.
Yeah, we've been calling it Infograph Pro through the reporting season of this, and it ended up being Chronograph Pro. And that's exactly what it is. Is it's like, you know, you take a face from the Series 3 and earlier, and you adapt it to the Series 4 and 5, but you can tell it wasn't designed for the Series 4 and 5. And Chronograph was in that category, kind of like utility, and the Activity Digital face, like some of those older faces. They wouldn't do them that way if they were designing them from scratch.
Right, yeah.
And now they've taken Chronograph, which was one of the faces from the first Apple Watch, and they've kind of reapproached it as like, what do we do if we're doing this as like a full screen Series 4 or Series 5 app or watch face? And that's what it is now it's Chronograph with like the corner complications where they go to the very edge and not like rounded, angled stuff. And then you can change the tachometer, tachometer, whatever, from being that to different versions of it. But it's definitely niche, I think. Yeah.
It definitely doesn't appeal to me. Like,
same. I tried it out, and it has some cool colors too. Like they're definitely going for like a look with it, where they got like this cool version of orange or green, or I think like beige, and they've got some neat default colors you can pick from besides like just white. But it's not. I tried it just to like, here's the new face, and it's not gonna stick with me. So
yeah, like California was so good last year, right? And
yeah, California reminds me of like taking the utility face, which is just like an analog watch face with numbers around the dial, and making that, but for the Series 4 and 5. And so they delivered then. Chronograph Pro is just it's the same approach. We take a Series 3 face and make it for the Series 4 and 5, but it's not like widespread, customizable, and It's weird.
Yeah, so kind of a bummer on the lack of new faces. At least at the WWDC event, maybe they will introduce more by the time the final release comes around.
Yeah.
Because they also didn't like address the always on stuff at all, right? Like,
Yeah, I had a list of things that I wanted to see from watchOS 7, and just like wrote it down before the keynote started, so I kind of know like where I started and where I ended up. And it was to have an analog version of like if you're in an app on the always on Series 5 or eventually later, then and you kind of like dismiss your arm and it's in kind of rest mode, then the analog clock with the blurred background takes over. Even if you use
the digital clock takes
digital
over.
clock,
Yeah.
even if you use an analog watch face, and so it kind of becomes like this weird screensaver mode. This not what a watch would do. And so I was hoping they would address that somehow by either doing an analog version of that, like resting watch face with a blurred background or something. It could just be we could see it. They could do it. And then also because now playing is on by default as like audio apps take over if they're active. That's the default. You can turn it off, but by default, if you're playing audio from your phone, your watch face will become the now playing screen, and it doesn't have an always on state either. And so you get that digital clock again. The only thing that doesn't get the digital clock is the workout app, and that was okay for Series 5, but then we thought maybe that there'd be a way for either more Apple apps or more Apple apps and third-party apps to do the same thing as what the workout app can do, and we get any of that with watchOS 7.
Like the always on was obviously introduced outside of the beta cycle in September with the watch, but then it felt like perfect timing for the next version around for them to finesse it up and actually add the obvious stuff. Like the fact that the always on face when you're not on the clock face is just only digital just seems so silly, because like so many of the faces they show are all analog, right? Mm-hmm. But then you just have to get yanked out into this pretty plain digital experience. It's just not very good. So
yeah, it falls back to being a digital watch.
So that was disappointing.
Yeah.
Because their big like feature for watch faces this year is face sharing, and you can basically just like send your current watch face configuration, so the face, the style, the colors, and then any complications you set, you can send that to a friend. You can make it, host it on a website for someone to download and install. I don't know if I'm ever going to use it though.
I think it's really cool in that, like, if I were talking to somebody, say I'm doing an interview with somebody and it's about the watch, and I ask, what watch face do you use? And they've got like 3 favorites, then they could send those over, and it could be like in the show notes of a podcast. And it's like not just a screenshot, but it's like tap here and they can be yours too. And the biggest appeal of that is that if you don't have the apps on their watch face, then you're prompted to install them if you want to complete the watch face like they have it configured. That's neat. And I've already I've shared some just in testing of like what is it like to share them as a file and like just put them out there on iCloud Drive. And I've mentioned before that I like kind of making watch faces and with what you can do with them and like finding things that look good based on the limited options. So I like this a lot. I think it's
and they make it really prominent because when you long press to reveal the faces, there's a massive share button right there.
Yeah. But I think the big story here is not just like how can you configure, a set number of watch faces and customizability. It's to promote apps, and they show this by, a few ways. One change now is that one app from a third-party developer can now have multiple complication types on a watch face. So before, Apple could do this with like weather. You'd get rain percentage and temperature and weather conditions, and they could all be different complications. But in an app like WatchSmith by David Smith, even though it's all about customizing complications, it can only have one slot on the watch face. And so in watchOS 7, a third-party app, they showed Nike Run Club as an example, could have any number of complication types. And so you can have a whole watch face dedicated to the Nike Run Club app, and it's like the Nike Run Club watch face. And so then Nike would want to promote that. It's like, download our app, which they promote anyway in the watch app, and you can get the Nike Run Club app functionality. But if you also do this watch face that you could configure on your own. We'll build it for you, and there's now a much better experience with interacting with our app. I think that app aspect of it is what is going to be the bigger deal here than like sharing between friends.
Yeah.
Because they'll show it like you mentioned on the web in the app store. They'll have like with the app, here is every complication on a watch face, and so that they showed a couple of examples like surf tracking and like an app for new parents. It's like, and because you can swipe between your watch faces, you can then have like an app version of a watch face in your lineup, and just go to that as your way of interacting with that. So I think that's going to be more popular in like turning a watch face into an app mode versus like, where do you put the temperature and what color is your watch face, and the ones that we can all pick.
Yeah, because face sharing, like, it's so calling out for just a third party face watch store, right? Like, especially as they have barely introduced any new faces this year. It's like, just let us have the whole, creativity and diversity of an app store and just let us go wild. And then if you find a cool one, you can set it up and then share it with your friends, right? Mm-hmm. And so I really hope they are heading in that direction. I think arguments about like, oh, it would make some people make ones that look bad, and so the Apple doesn't want to do it. Just like, that's just rubbish.
You can do that now with like Chronograph Pro, for example.
Yeah, or on like the iPhone, you can make plenty of widgets that look awful, and they're not going to not let that happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just a silly argument. I'd be surprised if it's not on their list of things to do. They just haven't, got down there yet.
I mean, year by year, they're building the infrastructure for it, and this is part of that.
Yeah, and like now you can build complications with SwiftUI and apps with SwiftUI. It feels like a pretty natural extension to make like clock face building possible with SwiftUI.
Yeah, I think that SwiftUI, so being Apple's newest way to code an app, that so in watchOS 6 you could make a SwiftUI app, but not a complication with SwiftUI. And so now I think it's way more possible to take like a chunk of your app that you've made and make that the complication. So I saw
you can do a lot of code reuse there for sure.
Right. Yeah. And so I saw David Smith like take his weather portion of WatchSmith. It's like, this is the weather app within WatchSmith, and then this is the large complication. It's the same code. So I think that's pretty cool, and that goes along with making app modes of watch faces.
Yeah, so they've gone from like WatchKit, which is terrible and garbage, and you can never make a nice watch face with that, to like SwiftUI for apps, SwiftUI for complications. Fingers crossed they're getting to SwiftUI for actual clock faces, and you could have dynamic, animations and zones for complications and stuff. I really hope they go in that direction.
Yeah,
but not this year.
Some of the changes, they've got some new workout types now. They tend to do this, like where you've got this category called Other, and you can label it as something, but it doesn't do anything special with how to track like movement and give you credit for the activity. They've now taken dance and they've made dance a workout type. And not just dance in general, but you can pick like specific types of dances. And doesn't it kind of like, based on the type that you say, monitor like upper body movements or lower body movements or both, depending on the dance type?
Yeah, so what they were kind of explaining is that if you're running, you're basically doing symmetric movement, right? If your arms are moving, your legs are moving, right? But with dance, you can just be, doing this with your arm, just shaking your arm around and your legs are static. So getting accurate readings on your actual like exertion is more complicated, and so they're using special algorithms and stuff to figure out if you are doing upper body stuff, lower body stuff, or both, to then actually give you a more accurate reading on calorie burn and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a very cool addition to the watch, and making it more accurate, because again, you could do Other before, but just the Other category is kind of a catch-all. Is good in that you can label it correctly, but anytime they take something like they did it with yoga before, where they make they put some intelligence behind it. And
specialized algorithms for the specific activity.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's a win. They did the same thing with core training, functional strength training, and then the big one for me is cool down. So like if I'm doing a Peloton workout on the bike, then they'll often recommend to take a cool down class, and you get, or like an outdoor run, you just get different metrics for the workout and then the cool down phase. So like after a run, it's a good idea to walk a little while too, and kind of transition to not running anymore. And to have it all in one workout is okay, but it definitely it messes with your stats and everything as like part of the run. So your pace, for example, would be much different if you included the cool down and walk as part of the run workout. And whatever kind of workout it is, to have a dedicated cool down workout type. I think it's less about the data that it provides in that session, but it's to break it up from what you've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't know, when you're doing a workout, you can very quickly just add cooldown on the end, because you can swipe to the side and press add, and you can click just cooldown and go. You don't have to cancel the workout, finish it, and then go back and start over.
Yeah,
they just added it on, which means you can just quickly switch from workout type to workout type.
Yeah, and that was a feature from, we're on Series 3 and Series 4 when they added that in software, which is very nice. So I wonder if cooldown could be like more prominent in the UI, I think, over time, like if they wanted to, because it applies to every workout as an add-on versus mixing different types. But it's a cool addition. And then the biggest feature for the watch this year is the cycling in maps that you get from the phone. It'll be on the watch too. No, it's true. But sleep tracking, and the sleep tracking story is interesting because this is a weird.
It's been
connection.
a long time coming.
Yeah, and this is a weird connection to make. But remember last year with cycle tracking to track like reproductive health for women in the watch. It was a watch presentation, but you could do the same things on the phone in the health app.
Yes.
And in sleep tracking, there's a bit of that as well, where you can do much of what are the features of sleep tracking on the phone minus your heart rate, and so not as good, accuracy of the data and movement. But you can, without an Apple Watch, do some version of sleep tracking in the phone that's more sophisticated than the previous bedtime clock. There's new modes that are incorporated. There's a lot more intelligence if you wear a watch to bed in this case. And there's some nice considerations for like how do you manage battery life and everything. But it's kind of they're doing. They mentioned that they've got machine learning involved, so that gives you some of the idea of like what's going on behind the scenes, versus just like noting your bedtime and when you woke up. But I would say is to try to characterize it. It feels like it doesn't go all the way. Like, is this really what we waited for and that they acquired Bennett for, or is there another component here which would require new hardware that would make it even more sophisticated? Because it doesn't seem like this is that's the alternative. Like you no longer need a Bennett sleep tracking pad in your bed. The watch is now this good. I'm not sure that they've really. They haven't done a whole lot more that you couldn't do with an app. It's just built in now.
Yeah, that was kind of my takeaway too. It's like we waited quite a while for this, and it's clearly been testing for a while, but it doesn't seem that much far apart from what the third-party companies have already been offering in the App Store for a while now.
Yeah,
like they do have integration with the system, obviously, so it can give you a reminder that if you've worn it to bed, you wake up in the morning and you need to charge your watch. It can like tell you like, oh, your watch is low battery because you've been using it to sleep. You should charge it while you shower and get ready.
Yeah,
and it gives you like a little good morning notification after you finish a sleep session, which gives you some weather and battery life and some summer information. And on the iPhone, they start like dimming the lock screen down before you actually go to bed. So they do have some integrations, but it definitely felt like, is this really it? Like, isn't there something more here that we were something really fancy that we're waiting for? And I haven't actually gotten a chance to try this out yet, but someone on Twitter was saying that the exposed data in the health app, it's good at showing like averages, but if you actually want to see like your last night sleeping and your day by day information, it's not that good. Like it shows you just like a summary average of the whole time. It can't break it down like hour by hour. This is when you're in deep sleep. This is when you're in REM sleep, that kind of stuff, where a lot of the other apps do already offer that. Yeah.
And that's where I wonder if a new processor that's designed to take on this task and a new version of the watch would add to this feature this fall. Maybe we'll see. But it does seem like the benefits are, before I wrote a story on 95Mac a while ago that was like, if you want to take an old Apple Watch and then reuse it for sleep tracking, here are 6 apps that you can use to do it. Just pick one of them. And then here are the modes that I recommend, like theater mode, so the screen won't turn on and like, wake you up. Do not disturb mode, so you don't get taps on your wrist or sounds. Those things. And this sleep mode kind of does all those for you, and that the screen only turns on like if you tap it. You've got to spin the crown to get out of the sleep like lock situation, so that you're kind of like when you are in water lock mode, so
Hmm.
that you don't accidentally tap something and do something on your watch in your sleep. And then also kind of discourages you from like checking your watch for more than what it shows you. Like it's just the time very dim. All of those are nice. It does feel like it will go further in the future, like because they've kind of just made a much more polished version of what third party apps could do before, and they still sell Beddit, and I think you're going to get a lot more data out of the Beddit sleep tracker accessory than the Apple Watch, and so that they do meet. They check off sleep tracking as a feature for the Apple Watch, like you've had with Fitbit, but I'm not sure that they're even doing as much data analysis as Fitbit.
Yeah,
Um,
it just felt a bit anticlimactic after like
yeah, totally. Yeah.
yeah, it was like we've been waiting. Like, why didn't you just add this, relatively basic sleep tracking stuff 3 years ago? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And maybe it's like maybe it's that we expected more because it's been such a long time, and that really it was just that they were like perfecting what they've got, and they didn't want to release something bad. But I can't help but wonder if it's that in the next version of the watch hardware that there's a new sophistication with that processor that they've designed to do more than what they can do now. And they
yeah,
do a lot of
same.
cool stuff. Like they take in movement, they take in your heart rate, they do different kind of analysis to sort of get the results that they have. It's not just like you're in bed or you're not, or you're touching your device or you're not using it, but and they certainly haven't answered the question of like I see a lot of people say, well, what are you going to do about battery life? And the best they have for you is that the sleep stuff is it's not very aggressive at using battery life. So like if you go to they recommend 30% or more to begin sleep tracking at night, and they'll warn you if you don't have that. And I think part of that is so that you can also like function in the morning and have some battery life, but it tends to use less than 10% overnight. And I think it's pretty inactive in that process. But yeah, I would say this is like step one, and there's something bigger coming here with sleep tracking.
It definitely felt like it, and so we have to see the
Yeah.
development there.
Yeah, they at least put more sleep data in the health app too, because they've always had that as well, as long as HealthKit's been there to support other sleep tracking apps. And now they tend to kind of like the framing of it is they do try to answer the question of like why track your sleep, and I think the answer there is kind of like if you're just not by just monitoring it, but by being more intentional about it, you can have other good habits too. And that's where the kind of cool the wind down feature where you say 45 minutes before bedtime
Hmm.
put the phone in this wind down state where you've really got to go through like a second lock screen to get to interact with your phone. Those are neat. If you use the Siri Watch Face on the Apple Watch, then you get wind down as like part of your schedule for in like the list of items that update on the rotation. So those are neat. And then also like maybe one of the biggest deals of all this is that when you added bedtime to the iPhone and the iPad, you got those special alarm tones that were so pleasant versus like the classic ones. And you've never had those tones on the watch. It's always been like one watch tone for the alarm. And now that there's sleep tracking, they've taken those nice bedtime tone or like wake up alarms, and now they're on the watch too. So, and you can do cool stuff with like scheduling and exceptions and snoozing and everything. Like it's a much better system than they had before. It just does feel like a step past the bedtime stuff that they had on the phone brought to the watch, and that surely something that's more sophisticated will come in the future.
For sure. And then like the last thing they had on watch specifically was the automatic hand washing,
Uh-huh.
right? Which
Yeah.
basically it sets a timer. It waits for you to do like hand washing motions, and apparently even uses the microphone to try and hear water running, and then it starts a timer. And lets you run basically for the 20 seconds recommended time to wash your hands. And if you stop before then, you can look at your watch face and it will say, you've still got 10 seconds to go. And then if you get to the end, it will do a nice little animation and say, well done and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know why they've done this, right?
Yeah.
I'm in a normal year, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't have been a priority. And it's even shown by the fact that it's off by default. You have to explicitly turn it on in settings to even get this to happen. And I've been running the watch beta since Monday, and I've already had a few times where it just lights up when I'm not actually washing my hands. Like today I was washing the plates up after dinner. It popped up then. I was running I was doing a workout where I was just running on the spot.
You're logging the workout, right?
Log in the workout with the workout app, and it still prompted me to, oh, you're doing a hand washing session. So there definitely needs to be a bit more intelligence for it to actually be something that I could recommend people turning on as standard. I mean, it's clever they can even detect that motion and pop it up.
And doesn't it factors in sounds of like water running as part of the process and everything?
Supposedly, yeah.
Yeah. Supposedly,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what water was happening when I was running, but there we go.
All that sweat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a clever idea, and obviously it's a nice affordance for the global environment, right?
Yes.
But it's not quite fully there yet to be like, this is something you could actually leave on. It just seems like there's too many false positives.
They weren't planning this, 3 years ago, and now it's time. It's like this is a lot of people are asking, maybe half jokingly, but certainly, the idea was there to replace the activity ring with like hand washing rings and that kind of thing. And effectively, like it's as if a third party made a hand washing app, which some people have done, and but now it's integrated with the system, and that's kind of what it is. It's like Apple's hand washing app, but there's no app. It's automatic detection and then encouragement to go the whole 20 seconds as recommended. I have it turned on and I haven't had any alerts yet, and I've tried to trigger it and I haven't pulled it off yet. I don't know, but I think the user interface for it is clever. How it's like bubbles making the countdown clock and the numbers and everything. So
yeah,
points for that. Yeah. I also think it's interesting to talk about what we expected from watchOS that wasn't there yet. All of the kind of school time and kid watch modes and things, and like kid activity tracking that's different from standard activity tracking. None of that was there. And it could be that Apple has these feature flagged where they work on things and they can turn it off and they release it when it's ready, or that there's a story to tell around a version of the watch that's marketed for that reason for kids, and that it is it's an updated version of the Series 3 with like a better chip or something, and call it the Series 3S, and they present that, and then part of it is like, now that this is available, here are some more features with watchOS 7.
Yeah, obviously this is all just a hunch, but it definitely felt like they were hanging on to stuff, right? Like,
yeah,
because normally, even in a normal year, the watchOS segment is pretty substantial, and this one just felt slightly too slim pickings.
Yeah, and the other thing of that is that we've reported out from 95 Mac that there'll be blood oxygen detection, so measuring that sensor, that level, and we heavily suspected that would be new hardware, not activating existing hardware, and so that will be another part of the watchOS 7 story, we believe, this fall. But it's like that with iPhone. It has been for a long time, where you get the software features and then the hardware is required for some other feature that is part of the update that they've also had to be working on. So I think later this fall we'll get the rest of the watchOS 7 feature list based on hardware. Yeah.
And then they had some nice like HomeKit updates, right? Which is nice to see.
Can I say one more thing too on the watch?
Yeah.
There's also on the watch, there's the Shortcuts app, which before you could interact with through Siri, but before Apple bought Workflow and named it Shortcuts, there was a workflow app on the watch, and it was a way to launch it and like tap a workflow that you've created. And now you get that on the watch. And so it's kind of neat because you've got your workflows there, but I think it also extends to complications and things like that. So it's really just it's bringing it back to feature parity with Workflow before Apple bought it and made it Shortcuts and integrated in the system.
Yeah, it's nice to see they brought that back, because a lot of people were annoyed when they took away the dedicated app.
Right. Yeah, and privacy.
Yeah. They did a nice. They always have a nice privacy section, right? And so this year they've got all sorts of stuff, including like they're going to make app developers explicitly tell the App Store what kind of tracking behaviors go on. So they're going to put that like in the App Store card, for instance. There's microphone and camera indicators in the status bar now. So like, even if you talk to Siri, a little like orange dot appears in the top right hand corner. It's like, what's this orange dot?
You can't turn it off, can you?
You can't turn it off. No.
I want to turn it off, especially on back to the watch for a moment with Siri. They don't have the dot concept, so they show you a microphone as like an icon. It's like, yeah, I know, I'm using it.
And the idea is that you can have some peace of mind if you're using a third party app that is inadvertently tracking you. You can see a little dot, and if you pull down on it, it will say like Twitter used the microphone recently or whatever. But in so many situations, that the microphone is being used, so you just get this annoying dot in the corner of the screen. So it's kind of frustrating. But I guess there is a massive conspiracy theory about like Facebook's always listening to you, or all this, all this stuff's going on. So at least here they can show up front.
I'm not sure that the dot in software is going to change that for people. Like if you make the connection of like a classic example is that you discuss something with somebody and then you start seeing ads for what you discussed, but it happens to be like on your network somebody had also been like looking that up or researching it, and so there's ads based on cookies for that. I'm not sure that a dot that it like confesses, is going to change that idea.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Which then is even more reason why you should be able to turn it off.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and they do have a nice one for location services now. So say if you've got a weather app, a third-party weather app, and you want to have local location, but you don't want them to be able to know exactly where you are at the street, the street road number level. Now you can just give them permission for approximate location. So basically you get like city level granularity for a location service, which is fine for stuff like weather apps, or when you're going to a restaurant app and you just want to find the nearest one. Like they don't need to know exactly where you are to the GPS coordinate. So being able to just say, just allow approximate location is that's a really good one.
Speaking of weather, in the weather app, you now get the next hour forecast for rain in a way that's very similar to Dark Sky, which Apple bought, but no radar or alerts. So you still need the Dark Sky app for the full functionality.
And I'm not sure if they're actually using Dark Sky data yet.
Yeah,
I mean, still attributes to the Weather Channel.
Right, and it just looks like that style, but maybe it's the idea minus the data. But at any rate, it's a very small connection, but not the full integration yet.
Yeah, like the full Dark Sky stuff probably come next year with like notifications for incoming precipitation or something.
Weather app for the iPad. Yeah.
Weather app for the iPad. Yeah.
I was in a situation over the weekend where my stepdad was using his iPad, and his physical calculator died like after 2 decades or something, and he was like, "Where's the calculator on the iPad?" And it's like, "I don't have one. You got to go and add one." And he thought I was joking. No, really.
That's funny. Mm-hmm. HomeKit, they kind of recapped the situation where they open source HomeKit. They're working on the chip standard connected home over IP with Amazon, Google, and all the rest.
From December, right?
From December, right? And that's they said they'd have a first draft of that by the end of this year, right? So that's obviously still work in progress. And then they did have some new features, right? So when you set up an accessory for the first time now, it's always recently it's been showing you like recommended scenes to add the accessory to, but now they're doing like automatic automation suggestions as well. So when you leave the house, turn this light off if you're registering a light for the first time, and they show like 3 or 4 popular behaviors that most people want to do with these accessories, and you just toggle them off with a little checkbox and go, which is a really nice advancement, because the setting up an automation stuff I think is a step too far for many people that just go and buy a smart home light and they plug it in, they set it up, they never actually go to do that stuff. So being able to like it directly show this to you when you're setting up the accessory will mean people actually just have this extra magic behavior for free that they would never actually do on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The stuff with home is a lot about the app itself too, because if you go to the Mac, then you've now got a sidebar with rooms where it isn't like you've got to just click to get to different places. That extends to the iPad as well. There's this new area between status and your favorite accessories where it's like things that are in use with the iconography for it, not just text. So there's just some cool changes. The thing with lights changing that we, what do they call it? Adaptive lighting.
They call it adaptive lighting, yeah. But it's basically night shift for lights.
As we reported out. That will be cool. I don't think that's in the beta yet, from what I can tell, because I've got some of the lights that change color temperature, not just color. And I don't think it's there yet, but that'll be neat to see. Like, it kind of changes my HomeKit strategy, where I've been focused on smart light switches and not bulbs. Yeah. And this goes to bulbs now, But it's cool for lamps where I use the different bulbs there. So.
And for HomeKit Secure Video, you can now set up activity zones, which is obviously like very basic functionality on all other smart video cameras, apart from the HomeKit stuff. But they're filling in the functionality, so you can select a zone, and any activity outside of that region just be ignored by the app, so you don't get notifications about stuff. You can just draw it, and they're adding face recognition detection based on your iCloud photo library. So this is clever. So the Faces library in Photos, it can now use that data to do face detection on your doorbell. So it could know like Ashley's at the door or whatever, or it's you, Zach, or it's
So if you
your
want
partner.
if you want to know that your mailman's there, you need to take like a screenshot of the video, add it to your photos library, name it, and then
Yeah.
okay, and then you get the announcement over your HomePod that they're at the door. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll say like Zach is at the door, which is
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah,
cool
that is
feature.
neat.
And on the Apple TV, it can now pop up like a notification of the doorbell camera, so you can see like a picture-in-picture window of the person pressing the doorbell, and then with the option of talk over audio, or whatever else straight
Yeah.
from there.
In previous years, we'd say at this point, that's cool for whatever doorbell comes, but there hasn't been one yet. Now we've got some options, kind of. So Robin Telecom has like their big industrial one for seems like buildings and new installations, and that's powered over Ethernet. So it's like you really can't retrofit your home with that unless you're doing a new building. Yobi is a new one. They don't do HomeKit secure video, and they don't have a client app. They just do HomeKit, so it's kind of a thing to wait for. Netatmo has one announced from CES, I think, or maybe even last year that we haven't seen yet. But there's definitely like you can get a HomeKit doorbell, just maybe not in the configuration that you want with HomeKit secure video and the right power interface and everything.
We're getting there. It's
We're
just
getting
taking
there.
its time.
Yeah, it'll be so sweet when you can. But when I read about HomeKit Secure Video, when that came out last year and came to the first cameras from Logitech, the thing there for me, part of what I wrote about was, what you have today is good, but you're missing some important like features that you would have in a client app. And so even if you didn't have to suck the camera out of the client app into the HomeKit app, you want those client app features in the home app anyway, to really find use there. And they're doing that, with the zone stuff and facial recognition stuff, which is, I think, exactly what they needed to do in kind of year 2 of HomeKit Secure Video.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we just
And
need
then
to
they
go with it now.
there's like in tvOS 14 as well, on the control center bit, they actually have like the top bit of the control center is just your HomeKit cameras, so you can quickly see them and swipe between them. So you don't have to, get like a third-party app or anything to do that, or ask Siri to show a camera. You can just literally hold down the button and it will slide over and you can see them, which is nice.
Yeah.
They're adding multiple users for Apple Arcade games, which is something they should have had last year when they actually did multiple use. Like a theme of tvOS 14 is basically tvOS 13 features implemented properly.
Yeah.
Because now you've got multiple users for games through Game Center, and you've got picture-in-picture for every application. Because when they did picture-in-picture last year, it was only contained to the TV app, and you'd leave TV and it would go away. But now you have picture-in-picture for every app, third-party apps, first-party apps, and obviously you can switch between apps, and the picture-in-picture carries on following you around. So they've basically done multiple users properly because now it's implemented for games, and they've done picture-in-picture properly as well because now it works in every application. And if you get a AirPlay request now to the TV, you can just have the AirPlay video take up a section of the TV. It doesn't have to take over the full thing every single time. So you basically get like a pip for an AirPlay session, which you can obviously optionally choose to full screen. But if you're just like watching something, you just want to quickly share something to the TV, you don't have to completely yank the people out of what's actually on the television screen, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can do AirPlay in 4K for the first time.
That's cool.
It's been limited to 1080p before.
Yeah, about time, because you've had a 4K TV for the longest time that needs to be refreshed. So.
And they're supporting new game controllers, and actually the game controller API is pretty rich now, so games can actually take advantage of all the different buttons and different controls of like the PlayStation controller, the Xbox controller, even like the PlayStation controller has a LED light on the back of it. And so now the API for gamepads for developers is so rich, the games can even adjust the LED light to whatever color they want for the game. You can show like health as green or red, and it even supports like rumble and vibration now, so you can send like haptic impulses to the controller and stuff. So they definitely fleshed that out a lot. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, which just means that they're making their own controller because they want
Probably.
to support those features.
Yeah, I mean, we had it rumored earlier in the year, and usually when Apple spends this much investment on like building out a framework to be that flexible, probably means they've got one of their own in development too.
Yeah, and their own controller would be an arcade pitch, and features that are unique to it would be like auto pairing and switching between devices. So you want to play arcade on your iPad or your Mac or your Apple TV, there's one controller. You don't have to sync it to each one. It's like AirPods, you know.
Yeah, maybe they do a bundle of Apple TV plus their own game controller for like,
Yeah.
200 or something.
Yeah, nice. It's just like we saw game controller support, and then there's arcade, so it kind of went together. And there were no new screensavers for tvOS, right? Which is like, one of
That was pretty funny because for the last 3 years they've done different types of aerial screensavers. Yeah. Although one feature they didn't mention on stage is that now you can actually choose what categories of aerials you want to see. So
good.
If you don't want to have the underwater ones, you can turn it off. So you
can so I can just do space ones if I want to.
You can have space ones, because I think the categories are underwater, landscapes. They're like when you're in the woods or whatever. Cityscapes, which is the ones where they're driving with buildings, and then the space aerials. So you could just have space if you just wanted space. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. I didn't know that, and it's also nice that they divided out the original aerial ones because you couldn't do that before either. It wasn't just like woods or cities; it was both in the collection. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's a nice change.
Yeah. And there's a couple of new things in beta versions too. So now with watchOS, there's going to be a public beta for the first time in July. There's only been developer betas before then, and then there's a HomePod beta through the Appleseed program, which is like invite only, I think, and super limited. It's like the public beta before there was a public beta, but that one, I don't know how you get into it. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're not sure about what's actually new in it yet either.
Yeah, but some people will be able to install a HomePod beta, which I imagine supports like the announced faces detected feature for doorbells and cameras.
And they are going to add third-party services on the HomePod itself, so you eventually maybe be able to stream Spotify directly and natively without having to go via AirPlay, which is nice.
Yeah, so there's that. You ready for the Mac stuff?
Yeah, exactly. The climax of the keynote this time was the Mac. And so we had bigger than expected updates on the operating system itself, right? Because, everyone knew the ARM stuff was coming, but they started with a pretty big bang in that they have a relatively major UI overhaul for macOS itself. So it's macOS Big Sur, because that's a place apparently in California. And they started off with like an Alan Dye video talking about design and inspiration. And they have this new UI appearance for the operating system where you've got like bigger buttons, toolbars have less chrome, so they don't have physical button shapes anymore as much unless you like hover over them. The dock like floats, it's not attached to the bottom. All the app icons now kind of look like iOS app icons, but a bit more 3D because they're all like rounded rectangles now, but they still have like some form of dimensionality. You've got like the new kind of translucent menu bar that kind of directly integrates with the background. Like the pull down sheets, which are like a classic of macOS, have gone now. Now you just get these like pop over cards that sit in the center, like these rounded rectangle cards. They're using SF symbols everywhere, which they introduced for iOS last year. You've got Control Center on the Mac now. That's nice. Notification Center now has like caught up to the iOS version because you've got group notifications, all those features. The same widget system that you saw on iOS is now also in Notification Center on the Mac, which is nice.
It's not a two-pane view where it's just notifications or widgets, and you got to click each one.
Yeah, and it's actually the modern notifications, like the iOS 14 ones. It's the same code, can be shared across both platforms, which is nice. What do you think of because you're running Big Sur, right? What do you think of the visual situation?
Yeah, so they push it as like the big redesign, I guess, because there's work that needs to go into making your app fit in and everything. But it feels like it's not like the version of iPhone OS through iOS 6, and then there's iOS 7 where it's a whole new theme that was dramatically different. It feels like there was this evolution to get here, and it's not like just a totally different system anymore. Because if you look back at like Leopard and Snow Leopard had a look to it, at least when I started using macOS, and then Lion and Mountain Lion had a different theme that was heavier. They pulled that back a little bit with Mavericks. I guess Yosemite was when they kind of had the
flattening.
Yeah, the flattening that it's like let's take that, to me was like let's take iOS 7 aesthetics, and by that point we're on like iOS 8 and 9 and put that on the Mac. So for this to be the big redesign, it just seems like a nice modernization of the look and not like a dramatic, you either love it or hate it thing to the look. And so I have like no strong reaction to it. I just have more of the feeling like every year there's something in the design that I like a little bit better than before, where it looks newer versus old because it is. And I just have a lot more of that this time. But it's like the most dramatic thing is that they encourage the app icons to have that shape, which even is like, and you can play out of that shape too.
Like on iOS, it's strictly rounded rectangles, but on
Yeah.
Big Sur, even the Apple apps poke out from that mask essentially.
Right, and it's not the iOS design either. Like it's more textured than that, like more layers to it than that.
Yeah, depth and 3D
and so it just feels like to me like this is what people have wanted from iOS, and it would look great on iPadOS, and like maybe we'll see this design start with the Mac and move over to iOS and iPadOS in time. I'm not sure why it wouldn't. Like if we just look at, I think one of the things that you found just to be like wow was like I think it was either stocks or voice memos that had just like in amount of shadows that it's just not like what you even have on iOS right now.
The stocks icons like really well textured, and then you look at the iOS one and it's just like two flat colors. It's like great.
Right. Yeah. And because a lot of the stuff, like if you went with kind of the default UI, just by running this up, updating your app for this version of a big Mac OS, like it'll just fit in. I think it's just not super dramatic to me. It's just nice. Like if people think otherwise, then this is it has different tastes and everything. But to me, it's like this is where we were going, and now they just kind of accelerated it a bit.
Yeah, and like I don't hate it by any means. Like I like most of it, right? Like, and it's my reaction to iOS 7 was a lot of it was pretty trash. And
it took time to level out. Sure.
Yeah, it took, and especially the like iOS 7.0 was way worse than even 7.1 because they did a lot of changes even at like first 2 months.
Every beta of iOS 7 was way different.
Yeah,
it was working in progress. Like
and then they revised it again with iOS 8 and iOS 9. Yeah. Big Sur's design, I think there are a few things that are a bit questionable, like. The menu bar menus aren't attached anymore. They're kind of just like separate rounded rectangles, like floating next to the button you clicked on. It's like, the context is you clicked on the thing to pull down the menu. So why is there a gap? Or I'm sure the toolbars will be divisive because they've kind of made like the toolbars bigger with bigger icons, but they've taken away the kind of like button bezel that go around them. It's just like the flat icons on their own until you like hover over and then they give you like this shadow behind it.
If you click on your version of macOS and in the menu bar, and then you move the cursor across the menu bar to different items, does the window pop out, or do you click again?
It just switches menus if you're moving left to right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's just the thing it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks good right now, but so I like this look, and I wouldn't have noticed if it weren't different unless you mentioned it. But it doesn't bother me.
Some people are saying that everything's because if you look at like the menus and stuff, everything's slightly bigger and they put more padding between everything. And some people are like, oh, they're going to make touch Macs because they're making each of the elements be a bit bigger and easier to click on. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they just wanted it to have more spacing because it looks nicer and it looks more modern. I don't think it has anything to do with them doing touch or not.
Yeah.
Like, the icons, the rounded rectangle, like, uniformity is fine. I think some of the icons, they've gone a bit overboard on retaining the gradients and the shadows. And, like, the messages icon is pretty extreme on how much of a gradient there is, like, to give it, like, this 3D look. I don't know, like, it's fine. Like, I'd say Big Sur's visual overhaul is a welcome change, and I'm sure there will be some, like, refinement and stuff over the beta season, but it's nowhere near as offensive as anything of, like the iOS 7 era. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's fine.
So the Mail app is not a Catalyst app brought from iOS or iPadOS to the Mac, but it does have this. It like when I think of the new design, like that looks like a different app to me now. It's still Apple Mail, works with all your services, but just like the look of it is so different that it feels like a new app without new features. And so I like interacting with the Mail app much more now. And do you remember when they changed Mail, like probably around Snow Leopard, where it used to be that you have, I guess, a mail list, and below that was like a whole like window wide version of the message, and you could switch back to the classic view, or you could have the new default where it was like over to the side and columns. it kind of reminds me of that, of like where that classic view just looked dated, even if it was functionally better. Then the default seemed to be like, you know, visually it looks better, and you'll get used to it. This seems like that to me now, where like even that version, just everything about it looks heavier and dated, and the new app feels like it's just like visually it's lighter, and it feels like it's been designed for today, not brought over from a decade ago. So
Yeah, and it's not mirroring what the iPad app looks like, but it
no,
definitely
yeah.
makes the Mac and the iPad feel more of a family now, right?
And the iPad app I guess, it's changed in such a way that it looks more like this too. So
yeah, like
all the new
because
sidebar stuff.
the old like the Catalina and like basically through Yosemite design was very departed from the iOS ideas, mostly because like the buttons still look like buttons, right? And so what they've done with Big Sur is try and make all that Chrome be more contextual, so you don't see the outlines and the platters until you hover over it, which makes it feel more like what the iOS design is, and everything's a lot whiter and brighter. They've kind of got rid of a lot of the grays and just replaced it with like whites with sidebars,
Or
right?
color, or more color.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lot more translucency as well. And so if you're using like vibrant wallpapers, that shines through a lot.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes it feel closer to, like, you could almost say the old Mac design was designed from a different company, right? Like it didn't feel together, and they're not identical, but they definitely feel more of a shared theme now.
Do you remember Mailbox, the Mac app?
Vaguely.
Yeah, it felt way out of place in its time because it was trying to do the iOS 7 aesthetic on the Mac before there was even the Yosemite update. And so it just seemed horrible. This reminds me a lot of that in terms of like just like the lightness of it all. But it's because it's all the same design and just evolved past what even that was. It fits in, you know. But I can't help but think that it was, I guess, the Yosemite update that was the big change from before to now, and this is just like the next version of that. And I guess the redesign is more in, you know, how does a column look, and like how is it spaced apart, and how does the toolbar look versus the whole theme of it all.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm really happy that Control Center's come across now, because the UI they've done there really nice. Like you have a little button which Control Center, and then it all pops out into these little like grid layout kind of things. And what's nice on the Mac is you can actually drag one of those categories into the menu bar to make a dedicated icon just for it. So like if you want Do Not Disturb back, you just drag it into the menu bar and it makes an icon for it. So they've given it an extra bit of functionality to make it stand apart.
And that's kind of like a shortcut of before you did it in system preferences, you toggle it on or off, and now there's like a visual component to it, and that's cool.
Yeah, and you see like brightness, but if you click on the brightness like platter, it then takes you to the detail options with like night shift and stuff behind it. So it's a pretty cool UI. I think the biggest like real world difference for me is going to be like the fact that Messages is now a capable like application, right? Like so now Messages is based on Catalyst. And so you get like the good search, you get the photo picker, you get all the messages effects, you get them emoji stickers, you get all of that, and you get all of the stuff that we talked about in the iOS 14 section, obviously with the pinning and the threading and stuff. So you actually get like a messages app that feels modern, and they've done a lot of work this year to make. Basically now there's two strands of Catalyst apps. You have like the old Catalyst apps, which are kind of like old and crunky, and the pixel scaling 66%, and the controls look like the old version, right? But now they have a new mode which is optimized Catalyst, and that uses proper pixel scaling, it uses native controls, and it feels like those apps feel respectable, right? And the Messages app is Catalyst optimized, and they've also done Maps as Catalyst optimized as well. And so they actually feel like proper apps, right? The old Catalyst is way different to what the optimized versions are like, just usage.
And the question isn't like why didn't they do this in the first place? It was just it took them time to build it and test it and release it, because they were kind of using this for last year for podcast, I think.
Yeah, in a way, it was a more immature version. The same difference,
right?
Yeah.
And so this is this is like the more mature version of that, but it's not just for Apple now. It's
I think the biggest criticism of like the original four Marzipan apps we did at the time was just like. Why did they release them early before they had the infrastructure ready to actually do them properly? If you know what I mean.
And I guess it was just because they weren't replacing something, and this is, I mean, we talked about it for the last 2-3 years now, that this is now that they've replaced a system app and it's better, being messages. So there's some things that so in messages you mentioned you get the cool pin things and all the new features. There is the app store. Well, it's not the app store. It's like the app drawer kind of where you can choose photos, Memoji stickers, images, or message effects. Being on the Mac now is very cool. You don't have the messages app store, but I think that would come in Big Sur on ARM, where you can have iOS apps on the Mac unadapted. They just run, because then those messages apps would just run too. Maybe
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
sticker packs, obviously.
Yeah. Right. So, but I'm liking it. I didn't know that about Maps. I don't think I've looked at Maps on Big Sur yet.
Yeah,
But,
Maps is Catalyst too, so you get like all of the new stuff, like the indoor mapping. You get the guides like we talked about. You get cycling routes. You get look around for the first time on the desktop. So the two system apps that they've actually now gone from pre-Catalyst to post-Catalyst experiences are Messages and Maps, and they are very, very. I'd say they're very high quality applications for like you. The other stuff was like blatantly, obviously bad. This is more than acceptable. Like,
the home app is just so much better. Like it's insane.
Yeah, I'm pretty
It's
sure
really
they've done an optimized version of Catalyst for home app as well, because it just looks way better.
Yeah, and just putting the sidebar there, like it's nothing that you couldn't imagine is like what people if someone spent a few minutes mocking up the design of how it should have been, this is what it is. It's
well, yeah, because the old home app was so stupid, because you'd have the little rooms button in the toolbar, and then it'd drop down this little menu, which was like a checkbox menu of the different rooms. It was no one would design it that way.
And there were things like the when you were setting an automation for a time, then the date picker was so horrible, and they fixed that now to be what you would expect it to be.
And they got the sidebar for like proper rooms navigation. Like
it's so much faster to navigate through. Like you don't have to think click. There's so much less clicking involved.
Yeah, they've actually thought out what the Mac layout should be, and that obviously translates to the iPad as well, which is great.
Yeah,
it just shows how stupid the original ones were. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the other big part of Big Sur is a Safari update. So they have proper extension support now. So even Chrome and Firefox extensions will apparently be able to port it over to Safari, which wasn't possible before because Safari would use its own like custom API. So, and that's one of the big reasons that people say, oh, I love Safari because it's more battery efficient, more performant, but I've got these cool extensions on Chrome that I don't have Safari. So that's obviously what they're trying to attract people over with. They've got this kind of like redesigned start page where you can have your own background picture now. They've got updated tab design where you can like hover over a tab and it will give you a little preview. And they've integrated the translation stuff. So the Translate app on iOS, now in Safari on both iOS and on the Mac, you can actually translate the whole web page as well.
Yeah. So, and that just reminds me, by the way, like all the things that we've been reporting, so much of this keynote was like, oh, check that box. There's that. There's some things that were not there yet, and we just think this will be coming in the future. But so much of it is like, there's the full version of that feature that we discovered and we're talking about, for the last few months. So.
Yeah, and I can't lie. One of the main reasons I launched Chrome is to do translation, because we have these like random Chinese reports, and the Safari translation is just not there at the moment. I'm not on Big Sur.
I do them in Safari, but I go to translate.google.com and then paste in the URL, and so it's multi steps.
Yeah, and so assuming the quality of Apple's translation is decent. Now I won't need to do that anymore. I'll just press the translation button in the address bar and it would do it for me.
In space, in covering space news for spaceexplorer.com now, there's a lot of stuff in Russian and Chinese. So it's welcome because of their space agencies. So.
And finally, they obviously announced the big transition. They brought Tim back because they knew it was serious. They're saying the Mac is transitioning to ARM. Well, they didn't actually say ARM. They said the Mac is transitioning to our own Apple Silicon. But obviously everybody knows those ARM chips, right? And they had the head of like silicon engineering, Saruji, did like a nice history lesson, basically boasting about how good their chips have been for the last decade compared to the competition.
Since the A4 and the iPhone 4, right, is when they've done their own versus how they would treat like a modem in the iPhone where it's sourced. And so it's been since the iPhone 4, all of the iPads, they reuse the chips in the HomePod and the Apple TV. They make a version of it for the watch. The Mac is just since the transition from PowerPC to Intel has just been Intel, And now what they're going to do is start doing their not the same chips that are in iPads and iPhones. It seems to be that the messaging is like you're not going to have a Mac that has the iPad chip that isn't just a developer transition kit. That there'll be a new class of Apple design chips that are in Macs.
Yeah, they said specifically we're designing a family of SoC, system on chips, for Mac specifically, that are able to offer more performance and more power efficiency at the same time. And I think what was most shocking here is they said that we'll actually be shipping the first Apple Silicon Mac before the end of the year.
Yeah, they're reporting before that, expected it to be mid next year. And so by the end of this year, it moves that timeline up considerably.
Yeah, and on Monday, Ming-Chi Kuo actually had an analyst report out which said that Apple's first ARM Mac will be a 13.3-inch MacBook Pro, and it will be shipping in Q4. So that does actually line up. And then he also said there's going to be an ARM iMac after that as well. So it seems like if Kuo's right, and he at least seemed to get the timing right, because they said they're going to ship the first one before the end of the year, that the first machine will be a MacBook Pro equivalent. So, they're being aggressive there. They're not going for the obvious, let's just start with the Air because it's, the cheapest entry level.
Or a new version of the 12-inch that was discontinued, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of going with probably the most popular.
I think the Airs are more popular than the Pros.
Okay.
I think it goes Air, then 13.3-inch MacBook Pro. So.
Okay.
But yeah, clearly they're gunning for it here, right? And they said, obviously, the first one's going to be out before the end of the year, and they're going to complete the transition within 2 years. So it's a pretty aggressive timeline to go from zero custom Mac CPUs to the entire lineup being
run. When you consider the range from MacBook Air power to Mac Pro power, that they seem to have an answer for that they can release within the next 2 years. That is pretty aggressive.
Yeah, and say the Mac Pro comes at the very end, right? Because that's what people expect.
Natural. Yeah.
You could imagine all the main consumer stuff being done in 6 months, being done by next WWDC. You do MacBook Pro, iMac, MacBook Air. You're basically there, right? And then it takes a bit longer for them to do a really professional desktop workstation chip. But it's a really aggressive timeline.
I wasn't, we talked about this before in previous episodes. I wasn't one to say don't buy a Mac right now if you're in the market for one. You need one because it'll be a long transition, but 2 years is not long. It's not that long. Obviously, if you're going to college right now and you need a computer, or you're starting a new job and you need a computer, use what you have. And to upgrade, buy one today, upgrade in 2 years is pretty fast. I think 3 years is pretty good for a computer. For you, you've been pulling one off for much longer than that. It can be done. But to say
I think most people hold laptops for 5 years.
Sure, yeah. But that 2 years is probably more about the Mac, like you say, about the Mac Pro than about the MacBook Air or iMac even. So,
yeah, they could have a 13-inch MacBook Pro in September that's running on silicon.
Yeah, and the advantages I think are worth it. If you look at the difference in what an iPad can do power-wise and performance-wise in terms of the battery life and cooling and not having to have a fan built into it. There's
and obviously really they're not going to abandon the current lineup, right?
Yeah, they even say we have more Intel iMac or Intel Macs in the pipeline. So
that they're really excited about.
Well, we're not.
Probably the iMac redesign, but and obviously, all the current Intel Macs aren't going to stop working. That Big Sur will work on Intel Macs. The next version of macOS will definitely work on Intel Macs as well. Probably the one after that. It's not the fact that they're going to get abandoned. It's the fact that the ARM ones are just going to be better. If you're not in a crunch time situation to buy an Apple laptop, just wait a year and you can get one that's going to be better power and with longer battery life. That's basically what they were saying today without actually saying it, right?
What changed my opinion on whether or not you should wait or really consider waiting to buy a Mac is that there's not a lot of drawbacks to the ARM Macs. Before it was you probably ought to wait because you probably shouldn't wait because the ARM Macs will be brand new categories of things with their own problems and their own limitations. And Apple's approach is kind of bring it all. If you can do it on Intel, you can do it on ARM. Maybe a limitation is not being able to run Windows in boot camp. But they have the ARM version, but they don't license it out. It's only for manufacturers. But they could even square that, figure that out between if they wanted to.
Yeah, the messaging here was we're not going to wait, we're doing it. So they obviously want developers to make native versions of their apps, but they are offering emulation story with Rosetta 2. All current iOS and iPhone and iPad apps will run on ARM Macs unless the developer explicitly tells them not to be. So by default, they're going to be made available. So that's like a million apps that will run in
So
some
you could
form.
have the 9 to 5 Mac app for the iPhone and iPad, but on your Mac and get those notifications even for like stories with alerts.
The
That's
whole
really
thing.
cool. Yeah.
And obviously, you won't get quite. They're going to be like bad catalyst apps, right? Because they're not going to be super optimized for the desktop experience.
But they'll be there.
They'll definitely be there.
And
You
they'll
could even
perform
have
well, too.
You could have Instagram running on your laptop before they have a native iPad version. How about that?
Which is useful, like as a tool to run Instagram, different multiple accounts and everything. You know, you pull in, if you're working on a desktop and or a laptop and you're pulling in resources there, like to bring it to only on the phone is a restriction. So
Yeah, and they even said they've been working with big developers like Microsoft Office and Adobe Photoshop and the Creative Cloud Suite to get their apps ready to go, which obviously lends weight to the first ARM Macs probably being more professional hardware, right? Because otherwise, yeah. And they're offering a developer transition kit for developers, which is basically like an A12. It's basically like a Mac Mini running an A12Z.
Yeah, the A12Z chip from the new iPad, which is mostly the same as the 2018 iPad.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and
512 gig SSD, 16 gigs of RAM, and a
USB-A and USB-C.
Yes.
No Thunderbolt.
Yeah, like it's a developer model. I wouldn't pay too much attention to the exact I/O lineup. Like they even said this chip is not going to be shipping in the customer product, right? So, in the talk show interview with John Gruber, Craig Federighi said the DTK runs macOS pretty well, and in that case, our Silicon team wasn't even trying, and they're going to be trying for the actual real deal.
You know, there's so many features. Machine learning related, like however, where they do something very specific with the chip. Just look at the Mac Pro where they've got the add-on accessory, the card or whatever, where it's made afterburner. Yeah, so it's for a very specific thing. So you can create something for a specific task and have it be better. So none of the chips, or the developer kit, transition kit, none of it is made to be on it's not optimized for a notebook or a desktop. And Apple's never made a chip for a desktop, for example. They've had chips that are in always-on hardware, like the Apple TV, but that's a recycled mobile chip.
Yeah, they haven't made one specifically for those products. They've just taken things that already exist from iPad and iPhone.
Yeah, and so an Apple TV, like, you know, it could be way more powerful than it actually is because it has no battery constraints. Like, there's no power management needed. Where the mobile chips, you know, kind of begin with iPhone, and they have to heavily consider performance and power management. And if you design one that's not even made for MacBooks, but it's made for iMacs, or it's made for Mac Minis or some other new category of Mac, then we've not yet seen what Apple can do when they don't have to consider
bigger power budget.
Exactly, like an infinite power budget. Yeah, just heating, and that's not even a problem. So
yeah, like and the A12Z in the iPad Pro is very fast and competes very well against the current MacBook Pro lineup in a lot of tasks. So it doesn't feel like a stretch to me at all that they can deliver an ARM chip that can beat it, right?
Yeah,
squarely. The concern was over the app story, but if they're going to offer emulation, it should be pretty okay. It should be pretty smooth sailing.
The cutoff was 32-bit apps, and that was addressed in macOS before this transition. So
that was dropped in Catalina. Yeah, so that was last year, basically.
Yeah, which, you know, in retrospect, like if that's going to be the cutoff, then not bad. You know, to address it before you even have this ARM requirement, because then it would.
Yeah, that's what people complained about last year. They're not going to besmirch the ARM Macs with that problem.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah, I'm really excited. Like the. Developers are starting to get their transition kits in July, and if there's a ARM Mac coming out before the end of the year, that's, you know, either September or October, pretty much. And so it's going to be a super interesting like end of the year situation to see just how powerful they are, because it's probably some variant of A14, right? Because they're going to do obviously the A14 in the iPhone, and then they're going to do, I don't know what they're going to call them, but A14M for Mac maybe, or they'll just call them something completely different entirely. But I think the Intel laptops are going to get embarrassed, basically.
Yeah.
So,
So the process for the transition kit is, if you have a developer account, then you request one, and you give a reason for why you would need one. So it tends to be that you've got an iOS app that you want to test on the Mac, or a Mac app that you want to make optimized for the ARM processor. I've seen some people that don't have apps at all that are getting them too, so it doesn't seem to be that strict. It's $500 to receive it. It's a loan. Do we know what happens after that? It goes back to Apple, but we
they
don't know
haven't
what
said
happens
if
to
you
money.
get your money back or not.
Yeah, so you've got to be eager to want this opportunity.
Yeah, with the old transition kit for the PowerPC to Intel transition, it was $1,000 lease, and then when you gave it back, you could either get your money back or you'd get iMac for free, basically.
Yeah.
I believe when they announced the transition kit last time, they didn't actually tell you going to get your money back either.
I was thinking that too.
That was only announced closer to the end of the program. So I think some people are buying these $500 transition kits hoping they're going to get like a free ARM Mac at the end of it. But I wouldn't count on it. You probably get your money back, but I don't know about anything else.
Right. Yeah. And I doubt it would be $500 and you have to send it back and you don't get anything from the experience.
Maybe you get like credit or something. Like you send it back, you get $500 off your next purchase or something.
Yeah. And it's very hush hush that you can't speak about it and talk about it because it's one of those programs.
The NDA is like, you're not allowed to benchmark it. You're not allowed to take screenshots of it. You're not allowed to tell someone that you bought it. But
the reasoning is that they don't want the story of the first ARM Mac to be the transition kit because it isn't the first consumer product, and the first consumer product will be better than that.
Yeah, but don't worry. People are going to tweet about it. It's gonna leak out some way. We'll have coverage of it for Mac in some way. There'll be plenty of people on Twitter tweeting about benchmarks. Benchmarks appear on Geekbench, right? Like, stuff is going to leak. So
before it's even out,
we'll see like the baseline performance of the A12Z, and then in October we'll be like decimated by the A14 version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was basically it, right? That was the wrap up.
Yeah, I did want to say, now that we're doing the live YouTube broadcast as we record versus just doing audio only after the fact, this is the first time that we've done what is a 2.5 hour episode, and people are still hanging around. So everyone who's been here from the start or has joined in, I appreciate that. It is really cool to see those numbers, and that's awesome.
And I do want to stress, like, obviously we're a bit critical in like the watchOS section and stuff, and the iPad section. I think this was a great event. Right?
Yeah, totally.
I think they did really well. They delivered in huge key areas. They fixed the phone call UI. They added widgets to the home screen. That's going to be a big deal, right? Like, even if people end up only using 1 or 2 widgets, that's enough. Like, that's what people want. They've got some great updates for the home. It's a shame there wasn't more on the HomePod stuff, but maybe that will come later when they do the HomePod
hardware.
Mini. Yeah, when they do the HomePod Mini. I think the macOS transition is looking fantastic. The accelerated timeline was a shock to basically everybody. Like, I certainly didn't expect them to. I thought they were going to say 2021.
You have a MacBook with a failing keyboard, and the 16-inch was kind of tempting. Wasn't a redesign majorly, so you weren't that excited about it. But now
it took them, 4 years to fix the butterfly keyboard.
Now it's 2 years to transition the chip. So now you're wholly in the camp of you're not going to buy a new Mac until it's a version of the ARM Mac that you want, right?
Oh, 100%. Well, I think unless you like desperately need a computer, like your current one's completely dead, why would you buy an Intel Mac right now? You should just wait, and you'll get something that's way better.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how long you're going to use it, the budget, the circumstances, and everything. There's a lot of factors into it, but by bringing everything over from the Mac plus iOS apps, that gives you just one reason before you even get to performance and everything. So
So in terms of like
compelling.
how they presented the event and in terms of actually what they announced, this one's really up there on like the best one of all time. It's close.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And for most people who experience WWDC remotely anyway, this has been, like, no debate, the best version of that because it's just so organized and not predictable, but like just being able to, like, manageable, being able to know.
And significant home screen updates for the iPhone, right? Like, that's what people have been wanting for years.
Yeah.
They're delivering them. So
this
is really, really, really impressive. Like a great showing from
even just coverage wise. We've always been able to look at videos and like report out new information based on videos that they release. But there's always been some sort of like some element of like we don't know what's happening in every single lab taking place simultaneously in person that before the video is out or if there's a video available. So it's been terrific. Considering the circumstances, it's been better than usual. So
yeah, for sure.
Yep. Awesome. All right, that is the Happy Hour podcast for this week. I think next week we'll both have more time with more betas and can speak more about specific things and what we think about them, give analysis. In the meantime, if you have any feedback, questions, concerns, compliments, whatever, you can email us at happyhour@9to5mac.com. Follow 9to5mac on Twitter and Facebook. You can watch the video version of this on YouTube. We're live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time. And you can also follow
Where can
us
people follow you?
Yeah, I am at Apollo Zac on Twitter. I also write for spaceexplored.com, part of the 9to5Mac network. Benjamin, you blog at
ezamayo.com.
And your Twitter handle is
ezamayo.
nice. We will be back next week. Bye, everybody, and thanks for
Bye-bye.
tuning in. Yep.